Hello, hello. This is Catherine Buckaloo, and you're listening to Truth Connections Radio. We are broadcasting from UPRN 107.7 FM, the Paranormal Radio Network, and truthconnections.com. Thank you all very much for being here. It has been said that an enlightened being plays with the universe the way a child plays with a ball. Tonight's guest is James Evans Bomar, also known as Sevan. Specializing in linguistics, etymology, and ciphering, he extracts the esoteric meaning within the language. Having spent years in deep study diving through symbolism, occult symbols, geometry, he has become an expert in defining what is behind the veil. Sevan is an independent researcher, public speaker, host of his own internet radio television program called Astral, and he has a special affinity for functions of the inner body, or as he likes to call it, the innerverse. His research in bioenergetics, water, and frequency has also yielded invaluable experimental data. In this episode, we will discuss our own limitless potential to harness our abilities to expand our consciousness and break free of programmed behavior patterns that were designed to divide, so we can activate our highest mind, body, and spirit potential. Please help me welcome Sevan Bomar to the show. Welcome, Sevan.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Wow, amazing. I think I'm definitely going to have to get your permission to use that advancement of the bio. I've been waiting to sit down and do it myself. I've just been so tied up, but just thank you for such a beautiful introduction. And it definitely holds true to what exactly is going on and what I'm about and what the network that I'm involved in is about. And so today, as we always introduce something more massive than before, I feel very fortunate to be able to share that on Truth Connections, because it is the real Truth Connection today.
Thank you, Sevan. We're very grateful that you came on the show today with us. Thank you for being here.
Indeed.
Would you like to begin by telling us, the audience, a little bit about your journey?
For sure, yeah. I'll definitely, as I always say, I have to give these introductions about myself, and it's really the most uncomfortable time for me in the recording. I'm sure I probably could do it a lot better at the end. But I will just start by saying that I'm just like everyone else in the sense that as a child, I had the curiosity, the fire, the will, and the passion to continue to expand and to grow. And what I've done in order to reset clocks and time and season and all this is I've allowed that growth to continue. And so my growth in life has been in successions of spiritual progression, that I've become aware of things through certain sequences and circumstances within my life that I'm now sharing with other individuals, and also and that's also being done in real time. And the core, what I would say, the core power source of this particular idea is what happens after death. Is there energy, free energy, especially for the body? Is there another stage of consciousness that we can reach? Do we have abilities? Do we have powers? What is our history? What is our real story? Because obviously the organism shows that it's been around for millions of years, even beyond time. And to also, more than anything, though, get the factual data about all of this. Not to really sit around and stay stuck in one belief system or an idea that may have holes in it, but to find something that is solid. And that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. A quest for knowledge is what brings a lot of us to the table, Indeed. To the truth table. I would like to begin talking about some of these alignments that have been happening. I know in late December, everyone was confronted with their egos, if you will. And now with this Grand Cross alignment, and the energy from that is very intense, and a lot of people are agitated. It seems like it's amplified times 100 or 1,000 even. But I like to try to look at it as an opportunity to learn and to rise above many issues that have been holding us back as individuals.
Indeed.
How would you like to look at it?
Well, just to understand alignments completely, alignments have everything to do with pole shifts, and that's why, the big advertisement of the alignment, which was, I think, the 2012 alignments, also came with the notion of a pole shift also taking place. If you remember, the information was always tied in together. There's going to be alignment and then the great pole shift. Okay, so this is the most current information that you'll find factual that shows you that alignments are connected to pole shifts. So obviously, as you get deeper into it, you figure out there's alignments all the time. You can even cause alignments. But the ones that are more popular, like the Grand Cross and then the one in December as you're speaking of, what happens with an individual is that they generally experience the antithesis to what they're currently, what frequency they're currently on, because this is obviously a system of harmonics, the Earth. It's developed in a dual system or a duality, a 0 and a 1. So for every reaction, there's an action. And so what happens is when you remain polarized, as the term actually means, is indicating, you either stay on the left or you stay on the right side of your consciousness. And so thus, when there is a shift, you often experience adverse things, or what they say, diametrically opposed things begin to occur in your life, right? That just, this is not right. And this is what also makes you notice these alignments a lot more than anything else. They have a way of agitating us. And so what happens, though, is that as you expand into the levels of the adept, and the field begins to generate a great deal of energy, meaning you go into a higher spin. It's just like what you see with the top. If it spins faster, it spins even more on its point. And this creates a balance. And so thus, when there's a pole shift, you don't experience any what we would call aggressive, or in our terminology, negative actions during that time. You experience a pickup in the energy, because the energy fields are now closer together. Everything is lining up. So you have really, at that point, more of an ability to level up faster. So if you picture this as, like, if you were standing on the sun and you see all these planets spinning around in front of you, at a certain point, just like a video game, they're all going to line up. So if you run down the sun, that path right then, it's going to be a lot quicker than if you just jump on the first ball, let's say Mercury, and you spin around, then you jump on the second ball, and there's Venus, and if you're traveling that way. And so in certain tenses, we have to look at a lot of what's going on. There's what we call it the micro-macro approach, is that it's actually going on in the innerverse first. Mm-hmm. And so if you can start to find a way to mesh the two, find integers, common integers, or even for your own self, build a GUI, which is a GUI. This means basically you build a way over the top of this reality that allows you from a spiritual level to interpret what is going on the physical level, rather than just acting like the physical level has nothing to do with the spiritual level for yourself, which is, we know it's not true. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, everyone's been saying I'm so agitated. I don't understand. I need to go to the doctors. And I'm like, I'm not telling you not to go to the doctors, but consider this, and my advice to them is flow like water. Try to ground yourself, meditate, and look for the lessons that the cosmos are trying to tell you, and try to rise above it.
Right, because the other thing is that I can't fail to mention is that these lineups actually cause energy upheavals. That if you were looking at it as something that a spout in the ground, when the lineup happens, all of a sudden the spout would shoot out a certain kind of energy. Same thing that happens with earthquakes. When plates crack open, they release a certain kind of effervescent or ethereal energy that is a real energy. So it means it's alive. And that those energies, they need to be put into their place. Like they are trying to find, and we have to realize that, when energy is moving around, it has to go into a vessel. It's the same thing even with a male. He's a lot of energy. He's got to go into a vessel. I hate to make it even sexual at this point, but I don't. The reality is that it's all connected. Right. That there is a mating going on in the reality. As I say, sex is six. But this is not always a physical encounter. And I talked about it earlier, but it's about when your idea is meshed with my idea, and then it becomes a new idea.
It becomes a dance.
Exactly. Because, like, let's say, for instance, the gentleman builds the stove. He creates this stove. And then you create this cake. And then you put the cake in the stove, and then it comes out. And this is now a collaboration. And the two will not be able to function without the other. So there's so many of these relationships going on in this reality, it creates a web. And this web, which every adept knows about, it actually intermeshing over everyone and everything, that is the hive. That is the true definition of a hive. It actually exists. It's not something that's a figment of our imagination. This hive that links us together, even if we don't want to see it or we can't see it on the astral level, It is the reason why you have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. In most cases, most people have those appendages or are born with those appendages. That is the overall mass effect. So what happens is that this 2 arms, 2 legs, and the head, this phi template, actually is what is connecting us to each other. So that also equals, whether people realize it or not, where in reincarnation comes in, like how reincarnation even works. Like if you need to get in there, you need to get the technical data on reincarnation. You're going to see that it works because when a person leaves their vessel finally, when they leave this physical body, and then go into this field, and this field is a collection of all of the experiences and the data of this reality. Right. So the person is not going to lose or get lost. You see what I mean? Like people need to understand what's really going on. That whole web of information, all of the knowledge and all of what humanity really is what you're enveloped in. That is the womb, the hive.
The inner web.
Exactly. This is where the matrix, and this is lattice work. The easiest thing, because web, sometimes people say web, because know a lot about the languages and things. It's not the best word to use. I use lattice work. It sounds a lot better. It sounds like lace. Okay? And so what's happening is that there's more of a lace that Mother is using in order to keep many of the life forms that are yet to emancipate or needing more incubation time into these frameworks so that they have the ability to learn through their experiences and through their different developments. And these experiences are actually our experiences as everything through multiple lifetimes, as long as we want to play the game. But where humanity is right now, many humans are on the planet now at such a vast state of intellect that they don't want to play games anymore. They're ready to move into the field where it's the depth field. It's like WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get.
I would say school's out.
Exactly.
School's out.
Taking training wheels off. And there's a responsibility that comes with this. And that's, of course, what the resistance after quest and all this is about, is the integral training that is necessary for an individual to get ready for self-substantiation. Now, the interesting part is, though, is that self-substantiation is actually going to occur for every species here that you're looking at. It's going to occur at a certain point. This is just as sure as your success. You will succeed at some point. The big question is, when will you succeed? And that's where we're at. That's the control point, because we are playing around, in a sense, with time. We are trying to reduce time. We want success faster. But this time, we have our projections set correctly. Success is not just limited to some green talisman called money. Success is limited in that tense. Success becomes unlimited, because they always say the idea of success is based on who you're talking to. When success becomes unlimited, it is to eliminate one very simple thing: division.
Yes, I know you touched base on that earlier, but since we're on the topic, how do we function as a hive mind? Just to break it down real simple for everybody.
That basically the geometry of the human body is all giving off the same frequency. Just like if you were to have another object, let's say, for instance, when you look into cymatics, this is what really gives you the knowledge about this. But if you play 528 hertz, it creates a cornucopic field of convex triangles. So this geometry then of a convex triangle is connected to that frequency. And then thus it's making a sound, and it also has a color. Okay? So this means that sound, shape, and color are all intertwined. So if you look at the human being, they're an externalization of sound, shape, and color. The voice, the shape of the body, and then the color of the skin. And so playing, of course, that's the games of division. But the reality is playing. The reason why I use the term playing is because this is an orchestra. Everything is organic. So everything is playing with something else. And they're all playing in this harmonic tone that never repeats itself twice. In hearing the tone from this world, you will know that tone will never be played again. And many people this is the third year, that are musical geniuses, had tapped into that. They tapped into a field where it was never going to happen again. So the greatest thing was to enjoy it now. So if we're actually in a stage where we're already looking for the end or trying to go back to the past, that means that we're not present. So there's no way to tap in fully, put the tentacles in to what we're experiencing, basically come home, Alice, leave Wonderland, and come back into the real reality, because you're needed here. You're needed at your home. And then, of course, this home has a lot to do with being inside, Because being inside of self and comfortable inside of self, because there's nothing we can do for an external reality if we do not feel that within. You can't even build yourself up to it. How can you help other people? You don't even feel like getting up in the morning. So we talk about innerstanding. And this, of course, is the method in which that has been taught in order to get a person to realize that they need to begin to cycle their energy. And this is the Taurus energy. Cycle the energy within to fully discover rather than without, trying to find God in the sky, trying to find hope in some man or some woman, trying to do that when all you're going to see is broken mirrors because there's a lot of what connects in this reality to the occult. There's a lot. We have so much, and this is the reality of this reality. We actually are in some kind of overwhelming state. And I cracked into this when I started realizing that the organs were producing all these endorphins like serotonin, melatonin. And then we got even deeper into it when we realized that the organs were connected to the chakras. And then we got to the height of it when we realized what bliss actually is. And bliss is when your body is calibrated to a point where all your organs are producing these liquids, serotonin, melatonin, all this, in the highest qualities because of your way of life. And then it mixes all those fluids together and then makes this, some call it the soma, some call it, different terms in history of what it's been called. But this liquid in itself, it's capable of anything. And so this is the potential of what we are. So you can see how when we're overwhelmed, meaning that when there's too many options, it's no longer just burgers and fries. It's, an entire French menu. We have a tendency to never focus on one specific thing so that we become masters. And this is the trick. And this kind of gets exactly into what I was thinking about 2 days ago. It was a deep introspection. And what was coming across was that, first of all, that I needed to stand up completely, and this is called innerstand, to remaining here in this reality for the children. And here was why. And there's always a reconfirmation of this. And this is what I was telling people about balance. It's like some people say, well, what, you weren't about the children before? Of course. But it's an everyday thing. Sometimes you just get hit in the head with it during one of these alignments, like, hey, remember the children. And then all of a sudden you get flashed with all this stuff going on. And what was shown to me is that when parents were using lots of dopamine, which you can go on you can get it on Wikipedia and see, dopamine is incredible to what it's doing to this world. And it also produces melanites, which, is even deeper level to the attraction of melanated people to dopamine and how melanated people naturally produce dopamine. So in a sense, if a melanated person's using their powers wrong, they can be like a drug. Hello, Jay-Z and these Lil Wayne and these kind of individuals. But this gets so deep that it talks about when the parent is using dopamine, that it gets into the system. And then immediately from Wikipedia, because, they're still worshiping the owls and all that stuff, the whole massive state of consciousness came in and said, so what happens then is that the person is sending this message consistently, especially the mother and the father, if they're still together, into the future that I need to produce more dopamine. Because the child is them. It's only an upgraded version with them now in together, right? So then this child comes out, as you'll read what ADD is, it's producing high amounts of dopamine. So this kid is basically producing a drug in a high rate that actually taps one into the future. But this drug moves so fast that it is very reckless for a slow-moving past. And so then the voice came in again and said, so imagine how it is for a slow-moving spirituality, a slow-moving religion, that your world will be always conscrewed and conflicted and torqued down until its religious system, as you call it, but the system of belief increases itself and the old template is shed off and broken, that Shaddai's kingdom has to crumble. It is a shell, meaning that the old way of thinking has a lot to do with sitting around bowing down and no movement. And for a person who is dealing with a little bit too much dopamine, this is very difficult. So every time something comes across that says, well, you need 5-6 years before you become the yoga master, there's about 5 or 6 minutes, 5 or 6 days, at tops 5 or 6 months before someone that's moving that fast with those kind of chemicals running through them naturally. So that was just a window inside because I said, indeed, then something new must be created. I render myself to be a direct part of that. Then I sign in myself another agreement of a time span of being here on the planet assisting individuals, because that's what a Bodhisattva is, to basically remain until all species ascend. You will close the door. Why? Because they're all you anyway. That's what we were tapping into is, and I know we have some other stuff to get into, but this is what I call code name Clearface. Clearface does not wear an identity, like a title, a label, a name, a word, a mark, a mason's mark, a seal, a sign, none of that stuff. No clothes. CLOTHES, CLOSE. It's the same thing. So no clothes, so no titles. And then Clearface loads rapidly what it needs to do when actually encountered by its next stage on the path. This is what the child was doing. The child doesn't actually have an identity. Now, you get a chance then to be a mature child. That's what it is. Now you'll be able to go back through analyzing your experiences, but not from a level of how we're doing the analysis with our mind, which is taking us, of course, exactly, not with fear. Not in a way where it's taking us out of the zone, right? So that's what we're talking about.
Yes, well, it's interesting that the word Bodhi means enlightenment, and the word Sattva means being. So Bodhisattva applies to one who is motivated by and seeks compassion and enlightenment for all sentient beings, both seen and unseen.
It was known as Bo for short. Mm-hmm. That Bo was the bridge that in which everyone was riding across in order to get to their next stage.
Absolutely. Through generosity, ethics, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. I just love that word, Bodhisattva.
I do too.
Yeah, it's a great word. Great song too.
I like that. I'll take that.
I know you do some work. You like to speak about the Kadmon programmed world. Tell us about that.
For sure. And this is a big thing because at the end of the day, even all of what I'm talking about, because if I go and explain aeons, how long is it going to take me to explain aeons? Maybe an aeon. So does everyone have time for me to sit down and explain the minuscule details of what went on in this reality? No. So what happens, though, is if someone is into hearing this explanation of different parts of the timeline, and they start getting all bent out of shape and, I don't know, I don't believe that, sometimes you have to call a time out and say, hey, man, woman, you know you're still in the Kadmon world, right? You know you're actually, you don't got to get bent out of shape because you have another vehicle inside of you that can exit that. Now, there's trainings for that now, but you used to be able to do that naturally, that if all of this, it never got too much for you. Like people say, oh man, I'm stressed out. This is too much for me. Are you kidding? Human? Human? This is like a joke across the galaxy. Something this simple as what's going on in this dimension becoming too much for us? Like that doesn't even make any sense. What happened to all those powers? So that gets into the powers and the abilities. And I may have to take a break for just a minute because I kind of skipped my train of thought because you asked me the question, but ask me the question one more time.
For which question was that? I'm sorry.
That was the last question. The Kadmon program world. Okay, here we go. Like people have to understand. I get super excited. But the Kadmon program world is, if you look in the Kabbalah, actually look at the entire Jewish mysticism. Jewish, meaning kind of like Jews, because the real Jews are black. They're Nagas, and they're from Sudan, Ethiopia, in that area where Kush is. And their story, which we'll get into a little bit later on in this show about migrating from the south to the north, is actually what everyone was attempting to do at some point. But we need to realize, again, where all of this knowledge really came from. And that's why this knowledge came from what we're calling Upper Egypt. Okay? But then it wasn't called Upper Egypt. It was called Ta Meri. It was the real place of where the ocean, because most of that was still underwater, but there were kingdoms underwater. And I don't want to get into too much of this, but I guess this is an extraterrestrial radio show, so I'm sure it's not too much for them to handle. But, okay, Earth is still underwater now, if people really want to understand. We're inside of a bubble, and there's the mist you're in right now. So let me just bring this honed in. So what the Kadmon program world is that when the priests and the individuals that had the information and knowledge about how to construct the bodies, how to make vessels, and all this knowledge came from the sea. The sea is what we're now seeing today as our ocean. So all of the spiral force, which is creates what we call the pentagram. That's why you see the pentagram in a lot of sea animals. A lot of the spores, or all of the spores, excuse me, that we call plants today, trees today, all were in the ocean first. And so that knowledge of being able to extract, kind of the process of how things are created in the ocean actually gives you the process of how to create things into the physical reality. Because that's where everything comes from in this planet. It came from the inside out, just like where we come from, right? We come from the inside of our mothers out. Mm-hmm. So the original people from this planet may not even have been the original people. They came from another planet and then arrived in the inside of this planet and then were birthed out of this planet at where we're calling the Nile Delta. Delta meaning an inverted triangle. Okay, so the first people were coming out right there. Okay, and what form they were in and what color they were is kind of clear, but you just have to get into the deeper levels of what they call now the occult. But anyway, that system of knowledge of how to do that, how to travel around, that creates alchemy, how to defy gravity, all these kind of things was present there. And then once that knowledge spread from there, it was usurped, it was tried to be sold, there was all sorts of things going on. It was knowledge of power. So when it fell finally into the hands of those who hold the covenant today, it became what we call Adam Kadmon, who's an androgen. It's not a man. It's a half male, half female. But this diagram, which I'll be also showing tomorrow, and some people have seen it on the website, but this diagram is actually that of a full body, a full hermaphroditic body, with each part of the body, the nadis, the chakras, the acupuncture points, and all this, as different levels and stages where different things take place, almost like a processing plant. And that this template in itself, just like your body is a processing plant. Some people are like, wait a minute, extraterrestrials processing us? Look, you're the extraterrestrial, okay? Your body is processing other life forms. When you drink water, when you eat fruit, all these are other life forms, and you put them into a processor. And this processor is lined out just like the universe. So if you flip all that back around, you see what it is that the knowledge that we hold within is the most powerful. And that's why they have us looking outside for the truth, because we'll never find it there. So what the Kadmon program world is the outside truth. It is the exoteric knowledge of what goes on within. And this makes up all religions. It makes up the highest levels of religions. In fact, the highest levels of religions here on this world make up the feet of the Kadmon body. And that, behold, what was seen was several worlds all laid on top of each other like ziggurats, like pyramids themselves, all consisting of colors and frequencies of beings living, inhabiting, that were all connected, but were not aware of their connection because of the wall in between each dimension.
Yes.
And that what these walls are what we're calling the atmosphere, or atmosphere, which is the clouds or the envelopments that are created from the fears of our mind. That's why everything is backed up in the cloud now. Back it up on the cloud. Back all your crap up in the sky. So then that creates a wall between you and the other world. And this wall actually becomes alive. This is the deeper thing. The clouds, and you'll see this in the dream world, in the astral plane, and it's misty and all this mysticism around, and then weird things are happening in the mist. And these are all ideas and things floating around, eidolons and thought forms, many of which are deformed. Because the language that we're using, that we're thinking in, is not creating balance. The way that we're acting and the intentions that we're sending out these days is not sending balance. So the moralistic value of the human being, which is basically like its stock value in the universe, has gone down only in the degradation of our own species. Meaning, when we dividing is degradation. Okay? And so when we degrade, we lose rank. And so what our world is designed like, even though we're all the same, except for these little petty variations, we have a deity. Notice all these words begin with D, which is definitely a phallic representation. Actually, it's a phallic and feminine representation, because notice D contains a straight line and a curve. Okay? So everything can be encompassed there in the divicanic plane. So what happens is that this division that occurs is what keeps us from the realization of our connection. And everyone knows that. You're like, oh, yeah, I know, we're all connected, but how? And so that's, of course, the finishing of the explanation of the hive, of that connection now. And maybe it's not the finishing of the explanation, because what was asked was, how do these shapes, so that would be the question, how do these shapes, this body, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, all connect us? And it's because we do still consider, like you have a baby, you consider that baby yours, that's your auntie, but if it didn't fit the form of phi, meaning that if she didn't have certain appendages, you wouldn't consider it as being a part of you. And so, like I said, this is what creates the division. So when you become a being that doesn't actually see sound, shape, color, you actually become, and remember, this is a ladder up. I'm talking about some heavy stuff today, but you actually become what the meaning, because I do deep into etymology and linguistics, the meaning for God was in the ancient language. So the word that was used for God in the ancient language, which was never uttered, it was ineffable. You could not pronounce it into a physical reality because it did things. It birthed things. It didn't come back void. And you're clear face in a tense, so your energy is free flowing, so you don't really have fears. Anything
you're connected to everything. Exactly,
because anything that approaches you that looks crazy to you, you only look at it and say, but another part of me, and then it dissolves. And then you start realizing that what's actually bringing these things that look opposed to you and things that are different, and basically your quarrels, your conflicts, your enemies, your misfortune, and all this is your mind. The mind is actually creating all of this stuff on the fly. And because the mind is so strong, you only see this until you get in the astral plane, because in the astral plane, there's no time lag. So whatever you think, poof, it's there. And then all of a sudden, you're interacting with it. And then because it's a part of the hive, all of its data plugs right into its omnipresent persona. So this is why many people can go into the dream world and communicate with multiple different people and get all the data and extract all the data from them. And it's because they're still connected. Those beings are all still connected. It's about it's like tapping into a system that has only a certain level of security. And the level of security is called fear. And then once you don't have it, you bypass the security system. And this is why the riddle was within the Sphinx. On the astral plane, when you see the Sphinx, you see this huge line and crazy things, right? Whatever your mind will take you, wherever it'll take you.
Absolutely.
But if you're not afraid, then a door appears. And this be the door to yourself, a composite being. Now, the Sphinx was a composite being. It was fire, earth, wind, water, etc. It was a composite. It was a sign of what humans are when they're inside of physical planes. And so that's why it's funny if you think about it, because I remember I was reading something that said, hey, remember that most of the stuff that you're seeing, these pyramids and these sphinx, this stuff, they just drop from space. And then because it holds so much meaning, if you drop a diamond from the sky, he becomes a fallen angel. It becomes anything that the interpreter that saw the action he's going to go all out with it. He's going to use the biggest words he or she has to explain it. You see what I mean? And we're causing this phenomena. And this is what you'll know about adepts and people that have a great deal of spiritual power. They get to a point where they can cause their own phenomena. Like anything they want to happen actually occurs. And then if your mind is too weak, and some of these individuals are dangerous, because if your mind is too weak, they can even plunge you into another world. This is where the Western mysticism doesn't even know about Eastern mysticism. Because in the Eastern mysticism, Dogen sects and these kind of sects, you can go in there and a Dogen master can plunge you into a whole nother world where you're not even having any access to your chakras. So it's just because that's what they do. And if that's what we did, meaning learning about spirituality day and night, because it's the only way to cross from the south to the north. Think about what's happening. This was another one, a jewel that was dropped earlier, even today. It was like, so if you didn't notice, everything migrates from the south to the north, because in the north, there's nothing there. So everyone that in the south, back in the ancient times, which you were calling the Indus Valley and those places where the temples of Angkor Wat were, when that was done and finished and the serpents had overrun the place, the malicious ones, once again, to say every serpent is bad is just as silly as saying every man is good. But the malicious serpents, as they show the Huras and the pulling the cord, the tug of war that was going on between the balance of good and evil, once this place was pretty much churned up, which is what you saw happen, that's the Great Flood, all of the people from the Indus Valley who were numerous, they were the first ones to obey the commandment, be fruitful and multiply, all migrated to the north. And that's where you got those Indian tribes that are the same people. The whole pun about Christopher Columbus calling the people he met Indian, all of these are riddles. India is Diana. So the reality is that the same people that are in Native Americans are also in India and also in Cambodia, because they were migrating to the north. Because this is why. In the South, there's a portal. And and this is not, I don't play the alien extraterrestrial games. But just like you have a anus and a few other holes in your body, the earth has them too. And in the South, there's one down there. And what comes out of there, it was already deemed that the standard person, even more advanced spiritual person, could not travel that way to exit. And this is the deep knowledge of how the earth, again, is a body. So it has these entry and exit points.
Are you speaking about hollow earth?
I'm speaking for sure about hollow earth, and hollow earth being the same toric field that we have in our body. Absolutely. That same kind of design, which places the center as the shell of the planet at only 15 miles, I believe, deep, and then the rest a hollow core, and then a centralized sun that's not hot. Okay, and then so this is. This is where we need to be. So the South wasn't a way to be able to be entered. They said there were terrible lizards. I don't know if that could be dinosaurs, that could be anything, but they said that the terrible lizards hung out in the South, and there was hope for mankind on the North. And this is why this is the reason why Jay-Z tried to name his baby North. This is the reason why there was Norse. This is the reason why there were 6 kings that attempted to travel all the way out into Hyperborea in the North Pole. The white rabbit, follow the white rabbit. That's what, that was the code then. Follow the white rabbit, meaning go to the north, and then you'll find the elders, the Acers, meaning that's Aesar. That's the same beings that were up originally in the Indus Valley. And so the tales that have come back officially from people that I've talked to directly, because I don't like to read the books and play the games, is that there are larger humans that live there, that the next stage, and this makes perfect sense. I'm not asking people to gander out, but the next stage of where we are, not where we were, but where we are, is somewhere inside of the earth already functioning, because that's how these planetary systems, when you're going if you want to call it the balanced way, you go within. And this has a way of increasing energy. Why, when you go out, it decreases energy. So all the beings that kept going inside, as we say, secular inside, insect, the ones who kept going inside, started functioning on these very strong hives. And again, because people think these hives are negative, but these hives are what are the webs that are carrying these beings across the abyss. That's why they called it Abyssinia. That was the same name, but it's all the same place. If you want to find the abyss, it's probably in Abyssinia. But that's what I was saying also, to bring everyone back, about the Kadmon world. Because all I'm explaining to you are different segments on the Kadmon body. So when you go into Tom Mary, into now Delta, out into that portal, you pop out in another area. That's the Stargate. Then when you come out there is another correspondence of you to the world that you just went into. Then, to go on the fringe, if you find that person, you can quicken that person. And I'll tell people it's happening now. It happened to me already 3 times. I've run into 3 versions of me. Had I made just slightly small change in decision. But I can see the geometry in the face. I can see the life path. I can read the names. And this is because I'm awake. So I'm watching that. I'm not accepting any of this before I can approve it. It's in quarantine first. That's where I keep it. And then once I start getting a file built on it, just like they do things now on the police station, they build a file on it. Once you get a big-ass file, then, so this is the same thing. So once I have a big file on something that's saying, look, it looks like, man, that these people are you. Look, let me show you the different variations. Don't run off. Look right here. Okay, remember this person said they were from here. Now remember this person, and then it'll all start lining it up. And then it say, now, here's now 3 examples. So what's going on? But remember that time. And this is what always happens to us, because trust me, when we have to go into proving stuff, it wastes a lot of time. It could waste years. Because then you remember 3 years ago you were told that. You were told that if you really did speed up and you got yourself be above the speed of light as far as your spiritual body, if you get above the speed of light, you should succeed in going around at least once. Thus, you would bump into yourself here in 3 dimension at some point. So be on the lookout. And then, depending upon how many times you run the circuit, like a gladiator would, you can actually meet yourself 3 or 4 times until to the point where you carry a wave. This means that you're running back and forth across time so fast that you create this disc. It's the same thing of what our fingernail is created from. Like you cut your fingernail, you see it's a half of a disc. These discs are basically like because these are all organics. Like I can give it to you in technological speak, but these are all organics. This disc is basically the husk or bark that you've created during your experiences of running in and out of time. So, because I'm out of time. So this is what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, the pineal gland is a stargate all by itself, and can connect you also that way.
All the glands are portals. All the glands are portals. They call them ductless glands.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I know that some people recognize 7 chakras and some recognize 21. Do you want to briefly go over that real quick?
For sure. These are the difference in the Kadmon template, that chakras develop based on a person's experiences through lifetimes. Also, experiences on other planets. Now, experiences on other planets don't take place anywhere but Earth. That's why in the whole astronomical ancient systems, Earth is not mentioned. This is because Earth is an illusionary place built by a collaborative frequency of people on a hive that all believe that they're from different places. Thus, those different places create coordinates, and then that coordinates make up an entire field. Okay, so how the systems were developed is there's numbers that master other numbers. Like in geometry, you can't actually draw a septagon with a compass. You have to do it yourself. All the other shapes you can draw with the compass, just like a pentagram is 72 degrees on the angle. And 72 degrees times 5 makes 360 degrees. That becomes a circle. So all of the other geometry, like squares, triangles, do the same things at certain degrees, except for 7. So then they figured out that 7 was this heavenly number that basically had to do with calculating things beyond time. And so that's also why Crowleyism, which is an inverted septagram, there is a war here going on. There's always a war going on. This war is between elves, because that 7-pointed star is the elven star. And they turn it upside down. That's what the Crowley symbol is. When you put the points on it, for those who practice it know it, but any person who sees it doesn't. When you put the points on the star is upside down, meaning it is inverting the teachings. When the star is right side up, it means it is upright. So that's Maersk, right? Maersk carries a 7-pointed upright star on all their cargo, because their cargo is still responsible for getting all the elves everything that they need. And then the elves are the smaller version of the L's, because VES only signifies child of, just like Ben signifies child of. So elven race. So this is how it happens, and I'm glad we're talking about this. I wanted to explain how you get people from other planets onto the planet Earth. And I kind of tapped into it earlier, but remember, Earth is like a collaborative projection, right? And so what happens is that you get Saturnalian people here because it is a frequency. You get Venusian people here because it's a frequency. It is the person's way of being and personal demeanor. And if they buy into the Kadmon program too deeply, these things spit out themselves as far as zodiac signs. That the person actually feels like, I'm Taurus this life. And this is how a Taurus is. And this is like a pre-program, though, that is encoded within the stars. And so the Egyptians had already, and really the Kemetans first, had figured out that what the stars were light codes or programs that were frequencies that were emitting and affecting our entire reality. And then they realized that they could take certain lights and amplify them to get the benefits of that frequency, while diverting certain lights in order to avoid the ailments of another frequency. You see what I mean?
So the more we raise our frequency to a higher vibration, the less these lower dimensional frequencies have power over us.
Indeed, because once you raise your frequency into another level, you actually generate your own light. And then the stars actually become dark. And this is deep. Again, this is the deep stuff about how the occult works. But these are deeper metaphors, but you can also see it in the physical reality that the sun as itself, it dwarfs humans in a sense because we see its light and we're like, oh shit. And this is why it's called dominion or domingo, which means Sunday. The sun is in dominion. There's nothing new under the sun, right? The sun is the creator. This is how the mythology goes. But then there is the cohort, meaning the one who, when the sun is gone, then this other one comes out known as the moon. Lord, who Nanar, sin. So then it comes out and it does its nighttime process because it's the nighttime sun. And then anytime the moon is waning, meaning weak, because the moon goes through its phases, then the other stars get a chance to shine. And they are called the lesser gods on the lesser vault of heaven. Even though you can see how superficial and exoteric this system would be when we pull out one of these new ultra-modern telescopes and figure out that some of these stars are bigger than our sun. And then so that is also the metaphor for how we start cracking out of this whole religion, is that we realize, first of all, these Easter teachers, they're running the full gambit. Like over here, there's not even, in the Bible, there's not even nothing about a balanced diet. Over here, they're talking about, they didn't even mention chakra over there. They mentioned chakra in Revelation is encoded as a 7 church. They definitely did not bring it forth like the Upanishads told you the war was going on within, and that you had already been overrun if you were reading this book. It's like you get this book, and it says if you're reading this, you've already been invaded. But it's invaded, not outvaded. And so the invasion, of course, takes place within. This is, we're ports ourselves, just like the earth is a port. So things they dock on us and they attempt to board. And this is like it's now encoded in our reality as never invite the vampire in, but you have to actually consent for it to come in. Or even deeper, as above, so below, meaning what you put in your mouth will affect what's lower in the areas of the body. Why? Because even the body, which is the Kadmon itself, is calibrated as the higher parts of the body, what is north, reigns over and makes the decisions for the lower part of the body, which is south. So
same thing with the astrological alignments that are going on.
Exactly.
As above, so below.
Exactly. So this is what I'm saying. If we're learning this in school, then it makes sense. Like we would already pop quasars. I walk through a wall and come out in another dimension and say hello to me again. And that's what I'm saying. The holdup is over. I don't see what happened now is that this is a whole different ballgame. And whether people are awake enough to actually feel it or not, just stay tuned because you will. But the reality is this. This information is so powerful you cannot kill it. To kill it is only to make it stronger than what it is right now. So it's already running its course. It's like Pumpkinhead. We just got to let it run its course at this point. And that's what the so-called elite are saying. Oh, snap. We might as well let it run its course. It means emancipation for us all. Now, people don't understand, ride the loophole when you're in time. Meaning that here in this reality, you have two diametrically opposed forces called black and white, who play on the outside of this prism, because inside of the prism, there's 7 colors. And that makes up all the other different people beside the black ones and the white ones. And then the black and the white ones, they keep it going back and forth with their 2 quarrels. So if they ever come together, then that means the whole prison or prism will collapse. So as a metaphor, this is when you take all your chakra centers, which are all these worlds. You got Martians running around, you got Venusians running around, and sit there and for a moment say, look, you guys are no longer separate. You're no longer Venus, you're no longer Mercury, you're no longer Mars, you're not any of this. You're collapsing all you guys like Russian dolls. You collapse time. This is factual. This means is that if we're no longer functioning on archonic systems, because the archons are the planets, they're the ones holding the arc. If we're no longer functioning on archonic systems, then we basically eliminate the system of time created by Saturn. But the system of Saturn was created because Saturn wasn't male, Saturn was a female, Saturn was cedar. Okay? So that actual connection means that Saturn, cedar, the previous sun, was the one that decided to incubate the planet in the hexagonal cubes in order for them to incubate. So then if we're sitting here like, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, at what level did we think that we can stand in front of the sun in that stage? It means that you stop complaining about it, actually get yourself into a position to be able to expand, and then go beyond it. But don't be surprised if you pop up in this thing again for whatever reason because you just want to see some of your old memories if it's still here. Because all those people who are trying to destroy Earth don't even really understand what Earth is. Just like the people who think Earth is going to be destroyed. Because they already told you, even just from a factual number, if you're talking about something that's billions of years, it'll only take me 72 to figure out how to stop time. So Earth already knows how to stop time. It's just like many beings are volunteering. It's like you sitting there volunteering your 21 years, 25 years, or really what most parents know as a lifetime with your child. It's like, well, yeah, I don't mind. I mean, where am I going anyway, seeing that I'm omniscient? So that's why we don't have to do anything. Actually, this is what you get to do. But we push into this next envelope and we do it together. All the stuff that, has been like, and all that kind of stuff. And because there's some real things out there, just let me and my crew take care of it. Smack him in the face and be like the cowardly lion. All of a sudden, he's just figuring out that he wants, what do you want? The nerve. Okay, so on the front gate of the Buckingham Palace, you'll see Rex Mundi. Meaning in the seal of this queen, the Buckingham Palace, there is a huge crown. If you look at the deity that it has the crown on his head, that's the animal form that is actually running the planet, aka Rex. Now, Rex, the Minotaur, is trapped inside of the maze. This is synonymously the portion of our brain where we're like trapped and we don't want to come out. We are afraid of actually going through the process of realizing that we are everything. This is also what happens on the onset of most, especially organic hallucinogenic drugs. Even in dream, when you're about to take off and you can feel yourself, for those who feel themselves taking off, there's a point of fear. Oh my goodness, I'm going somewhere. I'm going to the unknown. And so what I'm trying to explain to humanity is that if we go to the unknown together, and the unknown will be not like this. This means all the problems with this system will not be there. That's all it means. But if we go into the unknown together, it'll be just like when we were children. When we wanted to go on this adventure, we wanted to do something that was magnificent, like going down the tube that was dark, or going into the field to explore, and leaving at night, walk through the graveyard, and all that kind of stuff. You would never do it by yourself. So don't.
Right. Well, there certainly has been a lot of conjuring of dark energy and entities, and really, you cannot kill a negative entity. You can just bind it or send it back from whence it came. So I think frequency and vibration is the key to all of this.
It is, for sure, because, the methods in which the Catholic Church used to bind down many of these energetic forms who were themselves upset because of being trapped in a womb. It's the same way many people are upset that have phenomenal powers that are actually those powers are being limited because they're trapped. That method is an old way. That method is basically saying that it's a punishment way. It's that for what you've done, I'm going to punish you. And then, these are the same people that are saying that the only way you can really cure anything is to give it love and compassion. So here's what I'm saying. With these energies, these conjurations of darkness, the phantoms of the mind, all dissipate when the idea of emancipation becomes a reality, because the person is not traveling backwards anymore into the fields of distortion. See what these things are, because most people are too scared to sit down and try to figure it out. But what they are aborted children. They are deformed. And so what happens is it's because the process that was used to create us wasn't perfect from what we know as perfect, which is symmetrics. In the beginning, symmetrics were not perfect. We did not accomplish perfect symmetrics. And this birthed monsters. These were Tiamat's children. That's
pretty deep, Sevan.
Well, I mean, I'm just telling you what's going on.
I'm liking it too.
So this particular life form, in a sense, would be the same as being neglected. And this is actually the story of Yaldabaoth. And I'm not telling people to go and hug the monster and go to hug darkness. Don't get me wrong. You have to show yourself as a perfected form, meaning you actually have to become balanced before you affect these beings. And this is hidden in the Quran, and especially the numerical equivalent to the number 19 Quran. It explains that if you read this first verse, which actually is a tribute to self in its original language, that the jinn listen, and sometimes they're convinced. And what this means is, and they say at around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, because there's a point where both of the realms are like really close together during those times. And so, you know, a lot of things can be heard, and that's why that's your power time of solace and those kind of things, because there's a lineup that goes on in the morning. There's a lineup going on a lot, okay? So, but again, there's grand lineups and there's smaller lineups, etc. But this knowledge, again, that talks about these other forms, and also in more in the Gnostic tradition, it talks about this child Yaldabaoth, who's basically the god of this world. And the Jews obviously think so because they're still worshiping it incessantly. But the reality is that this particular being was known as the child. And the reason why it was called that is because it was still a childlike stage of mind, but like a child that didn't have a mother. And so that's the whole story of this child and its mother, Sophia. And that this child exclaimed that I'm the only God. And then that the mother said, Yaldabaoth, that's not the truth. Yaldabaoth is just Yah, okay? Fire. That is not the truth. Fire says, I'm the only one, because fire is father. Father is angry. Father is fear. Father is fire. Father uses pain. Father is P. P is the papacy. Papacy is the Pope. The Pope is the phallus. The feminine is the chalice. So this is the riddle. You see, like all of this language, like this is a real live running movie with riddles in it that everyone's in. If you look at the Wonderland show, then you'll see who Cheshire Cat is. This is the guy up the street. Then you see who the pieces on the board, the chess pieces on the board. You'll see all of those characters running around in Wonderland, and it's called Wonderland because it is reality, not actuality. There's a difference. Reality is what we think is going on. Actuality is what is really going on. And when we move into that actuality point, then we see the actors, first of all. We see the actors and the ones in action. Because remember, the stars in Hollywood are as below resonators to the stars in heaven. They each are holding their war. Samuel L. Jackson is holding up Samuel from Mars, the angel of Mars. So there's different characters that are holding up different constellations. That's why what Hollywood is attempting to do is create a program, a blueprint. That's why they're all intertwined. They bring the world in the movie, put all the hive together to watch the movie, and then when they send the energy into the movie, they then take the world, and the world is operating. And the only time you may visit the world is when you go to sleep and you dream on that parallax. It's like a dream scope. This means when you dream on that same, it's not what we call days, but at that same point of when you watch that movie with the collective, you will go into that world because that is the collective projection that is running. And this is why, as beings, we are so powerful, a lot more than in the past, and we're coming back around to it again, that every thought we had, especially within the system of communication that we were using, which was not English, that gave us the ability to create a world right then. But the only thing that world was missing, and this is where you tap into what Lucifer really is God. Because after all, if God created this world, and now I'll use this term, a creator, we'll keep the God thing out of the way because it means something else. If a creator creates a world, but is not present in that world goes about thinking there's no creator. Where is the creator? Like, trust me, even the most religious people don't believe there's a creator. They have fooled themselves into believing such things because, first of all, the only creator is themselves, and they're the furthest from that, right? They're all out trying to think there's something way out there. But here's the thing. When's the last time it talked to them? And when it did, whose mind did it use? Whose lips did it use? Because when you ask those kind of questions, well, it was talking through me. Then it was you. No, it was something else. Okay, you're lost. So this is almost like a quick fail. Like there were masters that come to the world. They were not as patient with what's going on right now. Once they asked you a couple of questions, they would know you were lost. And then they could determine by their quote unquote fuel supply, how much cultivation they had done, if they could actually pull you out of where you were. Because it was very similar to them putting an anchor on themselves with you on it and then trying to thrust out, so like a tow truck, pulling you out of a vortex, right? So many, like people weren't playing around with spiritual power and things back in the day. They knew what they were able to accomplish and what they couldn't accomplish based on their system of cultivation. But what I'm telling you now is that something new is coming, that our system of cultivation is perpetual. It involves the same thing that has become our demise, our ideas. That our ideas are actually the fuel that's going to propel us across this rift of destruction, or this preconceived destruction that never takes place, i.e. the end, which is married to the beginning. And that whole symbol is Ouroboros. The end married to the beginning, the male married to the female, the positive and the negative. Both of them want to act so separate, so they create this rift. Right? So the positive's over here and the negative's over here. But these are the same thing. One is the beginning and one is the end. So this is what happens then. Because a lot of people, they keep bagging on America. Oh, America this. America the destruction of the world. America this. You didn't even get it yet. This is what America was capable of doing, because everyone keeps trumping, oh, it was Egypt. Oh, it was Rome. Oh, it was Greece. Oh, it was Italy. Oh, it was France. But guess what? America was built on the design of the best of all of those cultures. Because we are all builders. The other day, it actually wasn't another way, it was about 5-6 months ago. Figured out there's this guy as a Mason living in my apartment. So I knew at some point it was going to end up happening. I was going to meet him in the elevator. And so the day came along. And this guy had already investigated me. He said, man, I can't even believe that you're living in my building. I don't even know what is going on, because when I saw some of the stuff you put out, it looks like you're against Masons. And so I went into him full bore, because I had already prepared for the whole thing. So he sat down there and sat there for a while, because he was a minion, meaning the individual that works only with his hands, or the pentagrams. They only build physical realities. They're not into the whole spiritual thing. So I hit him up with some of the new level of the stuff. And he said, man, I'm just going to have to sit and think about this. But there's still one thing that I do have to say, to show you again that even the minion can bring out a great deal of knowledge. He said, tell me if I'm right or wrong. But whatever you do, whether you call it good, and then whatever I do, whether you call it bad, it's still going to affect me and you. So thus, we are together. So in that, we are brothers.
Absolutely.
So I said, I can't even argue with you. You're right. So we departed from there, and I never heard from him again. He never heard from me. But I took that lesson. And I said, you know what? I mean, it's deep levels of truth. We're all putting our input into this whole thing, and it's changing it, right? But some are putting more input in than others. And this is where I, again, had to keep building on to the knowledge, because we started realizing, me and all the individuals that are on the collective frequency, that the strongest mind has a tendency to win. Meaning the strongest concept of or solid thought becomes the world that everyone who's still trying to figure out how to even do that, stay in. Right? And so this is also what is occurring in our reality, is that this particular dream, this particular vision, this particular perspective that was put together by 4 fathers, no longer 6 kings. What happened is that it only was capable, it runs so fast. Like this system is a 200, 300 year to the future or bust ride. This is that kind of chariot. The forefathers, whoever they were, if you want to call them Abraham, you want to call there's a Lincoln. Look at these names like Abraham, the Brahmin, like all these individuals are just back again, kicking it off the forefathers of the dimension, ready to kick off the next stage of it, which has to get you to a point to where you start kicking it off yourself. So it has certain limitations. And that's what the upgrade is about, is when you get tired of what you're looking at to a point where you decide to change it, right? And then until then, it's just going to keep looking uglier and uglier. So who's knocking that? Meaning that if I got a hardwired system that when I really start losing my state of consciousness of who I really am, it starts waking me up through a way of saying, hey, in a way, maybe it's fire, that it's starting to get hot down here. Like, this is crazy. The sun is decaying us. Like, people don't even understand what the hell's going on. What's causing time is the sun, and us counting the rotations of the moon and all of this stuff. But yet we do it. We're always ready for a birthday, but we don't want to get old. Give me a present. But then present is an anagram for the word serpent. So that's what I said. Riddles on top of mysteries, on top of enigmas. So then you got to get this certain kind of person. And I definitely know you got what it takes, Catherine. But the formula in itself is that of diverse things that have happened in reality. So much that the last question that you're asking yourself is, why me? After all, I didn't even graduate this, and I didn't even do that. And so that goes on, and the person never realizes it's a formula. If you get immersed into one thing too much, you can't realize you're everything. But guess what? Your parents, they gave you a lot, an allotment. This allotment, this inheritance, actually says on it everything. And the only thing that we've been doing down here is picking what part of everything we really want. Yes. So then the question is are we here not because we are afraid of death, but because we're afraid to really live? Was there a time that when it was known that we were immortal, immortality was a fear because of the conditions of where things had gotten? We kept asking ourselves the insane question: is this going to keep happening forever? And because the real knowledge and teaching was right then, it said, yes, this will be forever. So if our ancestors felt at any point that that was a limitation, i.e. a punishment, they canceled forever. To cancel forever is impossible. So they did the impossible. They bring a being into a dimension that has actually been created, even though the whole scheme of the entire thing shows that everything comes from nothing. But we can't actually comprehend where nothing comes from because it doesn't even make any sense. That's impossible. And then guess what? We did impossible at least 8 billion times right now. Every time we birth a child into the world, another set of impossible. So when you're asking me personally about whether humans, that these beings here that are beyond humans, beyond hymens, are they going to be able to get out of this one? I'll laugh at you because they can get out of the impossible. You see what I mean? Like, it's just strange like that. And as we get more with it, we won't want to always limit it, throw nets around it and all this kind of thing, because we know we're just doing that to ourselves. And then we'll be able to reinstill what it's like to be a child, what it's like to be energetic within the adventure itself, or the idea of our next experience, which we know we won't have to fear because who's with us? So then guess what? Who are we going to find then? The ones that are lost? Where are they? In darkness. So what do you need? Your own light. He be a shining one. Okay, what is the metaphor saying here? It says that an angel, which has a lot to do with the previous stage of what goes on with us before we're underneath the sun, underneath dominion, these kind of shining beings is a real thing. That when your energy centers kick off, they give off like cold fusion. If they're going in the wrong direction, which is the rest, well, I won't even call it the wrong direction. We'll just call it the hot direction, because some of these people are even learning how to deal with that. But it's when your Kundalini is hot. It's like a fire. It actually can burn things. Versus in the Eastern traditions, if you've done the cultivation properly, it's cold. It actually it's a cold fusion. It doesn't make you angry or make you want to go out. It really it's like a cold centrifuge, if I could give terms to it. My goal is to make things clear, to bring transparency, to collapse the wall, okay? And this is higher than the Berlin Wall. But this wall is the same one you see in the middle of the division symbol and the same one you see in the middle of the percentage symbol. Because remember, all these symbols are really occult symbols. But you see a dot, which signifies, or an orb, which signifies a spirit, or orb, or a live being. And then you see a straight line signifying a wall, and then another dot. So this means that you got one spirit over here, and then another spirit over here. Excuse me, you can call it souls, you can call it whatever you want, but two things that think they're divided. And then when we knock down that wall, we bring them back together. And this is also synonymous with bringing clarity and communication to those who we think we've lost. And for those who think that's crazy, they must have never lost someone. And guess what? I'm at this point in my life, because I haven't lost anyone yet, that I'm not going to wait until I lose someone, meaning close to my family, because I'm already losing my family. Like sometimes we got to, because that's where the power is. Like when you consider someone else over in Gaza as you, had you been born on the 23rd parallel of your spine, then you start looking at him like that, this is such a situation that I would never go through. And you start looking at him, shit, that could be me. Like, I mean, realistically, what's going on in Ukraine right now, like I'm trying to figure out what would the U.S. soldiers be doing if they had to deal with that kind of situation. Would they shoot us? You see what I mean? Because that's what's happening. That's a real life scenario. Like this is not fake. This is real world or exercise. This is real world. Right now in Ukraine, the whole thing that we cooked up about a year, 2 years ago about the government and the FEMA camps and all that is all demoing out itself to what stage it will really go through, except you're dealing with Ukrainians and Russians. Now, the question then would be, when you're dealing with American, whether he be soldier or civilian, which is the same, will he turn against his own? Or will we even be brought to that level? See, because that's the other thing. Like, I'm not into dealing with situations when they occur. I'm in a preventive maintenance. We're the preventive crew. You see what I mean? Like, that's what I would...
I think that also serves to wake up some of these soldiers, too, though.
I mean, I think...
to the idea of, wait a minute, what am I doing? That's my brother.
Exactly. And here's the thing about the universe, though, because remember, the universe, universe is still turning. It's in the zone, so it's actually not thinking. It's beyond thought. So what happens is that if we're down here and we're experiencing all of this, we're in the cruncher. What occurs between two men or two women can teach them both a lesson and then both be at a disadvantage. See, I was showed this about 4 months ago. I started contemplating what it'd be like to be the universe. What would it be like to introduce something like nuclear weapons and suns and all this kind of crap? Because what kind of, I wouldn't even call it crap, but in a sense, this is things that other people would say if you introduce into these kind of realities was destroying the reality, right? But the sun didn't have a problem introducing that. The universe didn't have a problem introducing that. So where is the moralistic bearing of the universe then? If it will introduce things to children that they don't even need to be playing with. So that means it's on a whole nother stage of consciousness is what we need to realize, right? And then meanwhile, we're in the grinder, so we need to be, for lack of terms, enforcing our own situations is what we're dealing with on the planet. So this is something that needs to be deeply thought about because in a certain sense, it actually equates to where our maturity comes in because our maturity is with enforcement. When we enforce what we believe in, and we're not talking about physical enforcement, we're talking about spiritual enforcement. Spiritual enforcement on self. When we enforce what we believe in within ourselves, we reinforce it. That's how we back up our current.
Do no harm.
Exactly. I mean, whatever your codes, creeds, and protocols are, this is how you back up your current. And let me explain how you see this in money. Money is an illusion. People have known that right now. But they've been knowing it since the money started printing out. But the reason why it's not an illusion in every tense is because if someone does not take it, then they cannot buy nor sell after a while. It's very difficult. Like I've watched people that try to do it and some have survived, but they basically are off the grid, right? So it's very difficult. But let me show you what happens if a country tries to do it. If a country tries to not take American dollar, we'll go to war with them right away. Why?
We don't have a central bank.
Well, if there's going to be a war is all I want to point out. And it's because on that dollar, there's a God they trust. Okay? And on all dollars, there's all the same thing. All the geometry and things on dollar bills across the world is all coming from a centralized place, which everyone's figuring out, right? But it's a talisman, so there's even deeper levels of what's being done with it. It's not just a piece of...
Not a magic.
Right. It's not just a piece of paper just being run across a printer and then printed out. So the enforcer behind it, that is where the power is with the God. Okay, so this is how you track down who God is, like right, the Germanic god Gud, the horned one. You understand that because that God is the enforcer of that currency. Because if someone takes it from you unlawfully per se, someone's got to come enforce it. They call the police, they call Interpol, they call these beings that know how to do pole shifts to change your frequency opposite to whatever you were doing before, and that's the scenario that they cause. Okay, so the other thing is that the papers are not limited to money. They're also deeds, certificates. All these other things are also enforced by one particular source. And that's what gives it its power, because the entire concept of God is as a weapon. For those who don't realize, if you go into the Old Testaments and you go into these deeper books, before a specific period of time especially, you'll find that God was not the being that was all loving and all caring for everyone. It was only for that people. And then from that point, it was served as a weapon to pray against, to destroy, and to utterly obliterate other people. So this means that God is a weapon then. Because in some people, they haven't struggled with this concept. Because look, remember God had, according to the Hebrews, he was in this ark. And then this ark, when you open up the lid and somebody happened to be on the opposing side of the ark, they all got fried like they were hit by a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. It was because it was. And that nuclear weapon, you see the same thing they talk about Canaan. Oh, we want to go back to the home to the promised land. We want to go back to home to the promised land, to Canaan. Who's Cain? Who was the first king? Who's the Cohen, the first priest king? Okay, which we know, again, his color, gender. But the reality is that that covenant that was done there was an agreement after the last war that created the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea forever stood as a totem in a tent, because you can't live in the Dead Sea. So they say, oh, it's got a lot of healing properties and stuff like that, because it's been for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, radiation turns into salt. If you want to understand where salt really comes from and where the whole parallel about bitter wormwood really was, the star that fell into the ocean and then caused the water, which was then clear and drinkable to man, to no longer be drinkable. Can man drink ocean water? No. You see what I mean? So they're telling you this weapon, one waf, has been trafficked for a prolonged period of time across the universe. And then you got certain people who get on the side of this child and start to see it as their protection and start to threaten others with it. Because that's also what we're dealing with in the world, is that the only thing that keeps other countries from taking over other countries is the threat of one of these wonder weapons hitting them in the face. Yeah. So, but this is no way to live, is what I'm saying, that this is a punishment system. Like, it'll collapse on itself anyway. Everyone's living in fear of the next person's wonder weapon. So what happens when the human becomes the wonder weapon? You see? Because we're already at that stage that human beings are being used against each other. The tactile diversity of someone who may be educated at Cambridge but never actually bought into any kind of womb of his own motherly state of consciousness, he's going to be Yaldabaoth. So you got 1,000 Yaldabaoths then. And that's what you got to understand about these templates and these blueprints of these different entities and deities. They all boiled up down to two things. You either build or destroy. That's it. Either you're a divider or you bring things together. That's it. If you divide it into anything you want, then ye are lost. So the only thing that we need to do in the direction that, actually, this is what you get to do. In the direction I'm going in, I'm bringing it all together. I'm omitting nobody, even ugly over there, where you keep calling ugly. He will be, she will be, it will be dissolved too. I will eat it. Ate it. 8. 7 will become 8. It will not be anymore something outside of me. When you eat something, it's inside of you. Because then notice how the God of the Bible exclaims, I'm the God of the universe. I'm the God who actually said, I'm the only God. He actually didn't even make that claim. They didn't even want to use that word. I am the God from inside of the world. Surely you do not exclaim that you are the head of anything from inside of it. That is the wrong position to be in, because the fact is it's not true. Like, there's no higher or lower in these kind of dimensions. And so, dementia, the dementia of the mind, craziness. So when we get into this stage of realizing that we need to dissolve this craziness about us being separate, then we get into the fun of this thing. Because this wasn't even designed to be like this. People are trying to make earth hell. You see what I mean? That's what's actually going on here. The program is trying to make earth hell. This doesn't look like hell. It's starting to, though. But I'm sure thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, you could not equate this with hell unless it was billions of years, right? When it's all fire. And then where we are then? In the fire. Totally purified.
And with that comes rebirth.
Exactly, because we're living through all these stages. And then this is a key point, because I said all of what I just said for the last 2 hours to say this. So this is what I found to be true then. Truth is a frequency. And if you get with it, you'll survive throughout all times, because it trumps time. And because what happens is when we go through that fire phase, and we will, all of the falsehood illusions missed, as we get closer to this heat, which is like a cold, burns off or freezes. Depends on what pole you're on, north or south. Then what will be left is the soul. And there's no such thing as souls with the S on the behind. Soul means all together. So what happens then in this life, and this is the challenge to myself, is I find truth and I stay with truth. And then when the cosmic wind and storm begins to take place, our foundation is firm. When all the falsehood blows off, we're still there. Because all we learned was truth. And we held to no falsehood. That's the thing.
I think the more that consciousness raises in every individual, the more they see the conjuring that's been going on via Hollywood and with the money and with the current belief systems of other people. And they just, start to see for the first time in their life, the more their consciousness rises, they cannot be fooled any longer.
Right, for sure. I mean, it's basically like cataracts. They just start breaking off of your eyes. And because it's interesting, because the knowledge and the awakening has a lot to do, as you mentioned, vibratory frequency. And what's really happening to the frequency is that it's oscillating faster. And this causes a vibration within the vehicle, which they say it's like waking a person from sleep mantra. And so then they say what happens then is that this shell cracks off. And, it's easier even to explain based on, there's different grades of spiritual power in a sense, where as far as foresight, because that, of course, is the keys to many of other spiritual powers, is just having the ability to foresight or see in the future. But what happens is that each of the chakras, obviously, on our body and the degrees in which we're on, it functions as where we're seeing from. And so it's possible for a person to be seeing from like below their waist, a netherworld, but still have sight. And so when they come to others, they're fully convinced, hey, this is what's going to happen. But it's their perspective. Like they're looking from like a lower level of it. While those who are on the perfected or the crown stage of it see it as it exactly is, because that's like the difference between if you're inside of a house, you can't even see the outside of it. But if you're outside the house and you're in the sky, you can see the whole neighborhood. You can see the whole city. And so this is the difference in the perspectives. And I feel like, well, I know that fear, it keeps a person into lower areas because it suppresses them. It depresses them. And
the higher your consciousness raises, you become tapped into that knowing energy. Some things I know, I don't know where I learned them from, I just know it.
Exactly, because those fields are populated heavily with the knowledge of knowing. I mean, because after all, that's what the frequency is. It's actually all of the information that is needed to maintain that frequency. And this is the other interesting part, is that, I mean, all the indicators show us, whether people are ready or not, or believe it or not, that there will be a time where there is no frequencies. There will be no movements, is what we call movements. No divisions is what we call division for those who continue to expand. Like those who don't, they can stay in division. Like remember, I think with other beings, being in division is summed up in the statement, I would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. Okay? And this is a very powerful statement, because some people, they just look over and they think it's like from AC/DC or something like that, or from Metallica or something. But it's not. It's actually the stage of mind of many of the more powerful but defunct beings, right? And it's because it's like not wanting to cash in or put your hand back in, okay? And this is why in the Code of the Matrix, in the movie The Matrix, when Neo asks the Oracle, well, what are these beings like the Merovingian? And she says they're old programs that don't want to go in, don't want to commit themselves. They don't want to retire. They're in exile. And what this is talking about again, that once you think you know, and they say this is actually the path of the real Buddha, that at a certain point early in the path, Buddha realized that everything he had taught was wrong, that it wasn't even the right way to teach. So he changed the entire thing. And then that started a new system. And then when he got to the next level, he realized that system was flawed too. And he went to another system. He kept perfecting it. Okay, and this is a real story because they're obviously a real Buddha. And so what this actually leads to is it leads to the deeper knowledge of understanding that we all are growing in this information and in this experience. And what happens is that it's all collecting together, and each time we come back around, we've gained greater insight as to what is actually taking place. So we can't be afraid to tear down the old walls of belief to construct something new that is going to be more proficient and make more sense based on what we've learned and what we've experienced already. If you visualize it, because you got to blow everything up into 3D, you would see two orbs in a tube. And then, so the wall would become a tube. And then that tube is the tube of time. So what generally separates two organisms is time. Because it's like if I'm in year 2013 and you're in 1942, we're going to have a hard time coming together unless it's a lineup. And so what you have is you have all these people on different parts of time, but all in the same reality. And you can see that some people, there's a throwback, so you can go in, they're still working on the old system. Some people are still amazed. You bring in a piece of technology, you bring in something, they're like, they may worship it. I mean, it's still that way in certain parts of the world. So this lets us know the timeline, or the core, they say that's the body of the snake, or whatever, the whole timeline itself, is coiled and stretched across the entire world, where certain people are already into the future stage of consciousness, and then some people are way in the past. And then obviously you got the beings that are present.
Well, when we come back to the break, we can talk a little bit about the stages of consciousness. That might be good to mention for the audience. And another point I wanted to touch base on was when we were talking about the chakras. You know, there's 7 chakras in some forms and 21, some people believe. But it's interesting that 7 divides into 21 3 times, which is polarity. So that could be the ultimate alchemical polarity for your introverse.
Right. Well, really, it's like a hinge. Like what you'll actually see in that area of the Kadmon body is the hinge takes place then, and it takes place through the process of the numbers. So 4, like I say, 4 is the door. 4 is the door. When you go through the door, there's fire. That fire is Phi, which is the fire body or the flame body. Humans are like a blazing fire on the astral plane. They look like literally stars. And that's why the stars on the pentagram, the star of the pentagram and the stars on the flags are synonymous, because a human is a blazing fire, an arm, 2 legs, and a head on the astral plane. So it looks like a moving pentagram. And then so after Phi, or the fire, you dip into 6, which is sex, and that cools you down. And that from that point, there is a birth, which is the mist, into 7. And then 7 obviously is the floating point. It's just, obviously the bridge. And some people get stuck in 7, and that's why 7 became known as the number of Yaldabaoth. That was the system of 7 days of the week and all these different things. And so the goal is as I'm explaining to everyone even now, and it's the perfect time to say it, is you have to bring that in. Like that's what she was talking about, the oracle about the Merovingian, and I'm glad I explained it. You got to bring it in, meaning you got to actually turn the thing in to become what you're supposed to be next. And this means that all of what you are, all of you believe, and all who you think you are, you got to be ready to basically give that up for something that you know to be greater. So you got to have a lot of trust in yourself to leave heaven, or that whole 7, you see what I mean? That whole part. And so this is the graduation through these phases, because then, so that's why 8 comes next, because it's synonymous with now all of what you've created is who you are. Because some people say, well, does this directly refer to me? This directly refers to everyone who's built a character. Okay, everyone here is, characters in a play. So if as long as you're still playing in a game, so if this character, again, needs to commit itself and turn itself in, it has a tendency not to want to do that. What I'm saying is that you have to be willing to, just like with a doctor, if a doctor's been in his degree for 20 years, he's been learning, and then all of a sudden he runs into a holistic naturopathic person, and then that knows their stuff, and then they're going to unroot and unsee every single thing he knows, or she knows. And so at that point, that's when 7 makes a decision if they're going to become 8 or not. So what you'll find is most people who are trumped up in all of their whole stuff, they stay in error. They stay in time. Because that's what error is time. Why the next being says, you know what, I'm an 8. It's like the gambling state of mind in a certain sense. A gambler can have $100,000 on the table and then push in the $100,000 on the chance that they may make $1 million. Okay, so where that whole thing comes from on a positive level is the transition between 7 to 8, because a lot has been built to get to the 7. Remember, there's been the 5, there's been the 6, there's been all those different phases, right? And then you're at the 7, and then they're telling you, hey, every single thing that you know now has to be turned in, and you got to start doing something new. This is the higher state of consciousness, right? So the person who's stuck is just going to say, no, I'm just going to teach and stay in the same level. I'm cool. I'm going to reign here in hell. That's what the statement means. I'm going to stay in this because I'm in perception of a higher stage, but I'm not going to be in control in those higher stages, because higher stages have nothing to do with control, because there's no such thing as division. So I'm telling you, this is the logical process of the mind of how you talk yourself down, because there's a lot of things that are inside of us that are so trumped up and prideful, they won't allow you to commit yourself for the next level of your expansion. They try to make you fear it by saying you'll be poor there. If you change in your doctor's degree and you go in to be a naturopath, you'll be downtown with the bums. What are you talking about? We spent 20 years. And so this is the same thing happening everywhere. You're a motorcycle rider. You're not a guru. Stop. You see, so this is how the mind goes to war. So 8. Now notice how the crown colony, we'll say, plays the role of 8 on the dimension now. Okay, before it was the ones in Ethiopia, because they were the Nagus. They wore these 8-pointed stars, the same ones that the queen has now got the covenant sitting on the Bimbin stone, or the stone of the sun, and now with this 8-pointed crest. And this 8 is 8. It is the beings responsible on the dimension for recycling. Okay, so this
Infinity.
is also. Exactly. So this is why, and that's why it's going to last forever. Our kingdom's going to last forever. But see, the thing is, it's not the people that we're seeing run it, i.e. the British. It is a way of mind. That crown passes all around the world. It's the same thing of what you see in the zodiac, that the sun moves into different signs. So that's what the crown is. 1 minute it's British, next minute it's Irish, next minute it's back to Africa, next minute, you see what I mean? It keeps passing itself around for the game to keep playing. But in the end of the game, the king and the pawn both go in the same box. So everyone should keep that in mind. So again, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this procession out of this old stage of consciousness, out of this old template, this old husk, into this new stage where it's going to include everyone, because that's the only thing that this dimension doesn't have, is everyone together. That's the last thing that is missing.
Yes, and you made me think of some song lyrics. Where's that confounded bridge? And a lot of people don't realize Led Zeppelin's songs were laced with alchemical innuendo.
For sure. I mean, that's why any of these songs that end up surviving, or individuals end up surviving for a prolonged period of time, is because they attach themselves to the wheel.
Yeah.
And then that's why they always carry these pentagrams around, but they're very clear to show you where they are with it. And that's why they turn it upside down. It means a world.
Yes.
like I said, it means worlds to me. But I'm going to go ahead and let you take a brief break, and I'm going to go ahead and freshen myself up. And then we got there's no time limit, but obviously, we have to do depart at some point, so we can just get to, the last few questions of the conversation.
Yes,
and then,
we're pre-recording this today for the audience's sake, so we have the luxury of taking as much time as we like.
Exactly.
But before we go to break, I would like to invite everyone to sign up for our Facebook page or YouTube channel. And you can do that at truthconnections.com. There are 2 clickable links there that will take you to either of those options. There's also an option for a donate button, and if you're in a position and you would like to donate, if you're enjoying this program, we would certainly appreciate that. All right, back to business. Since our guest is in Costa Rica, I thought it would be cool to play a conscious songwriter, musician song. It's got a little Latin flavor to it. And tonight's break song is by Elias Clay. More of her music can be found at eliasclay.com and SoundCloud. This song is called Esta Experiencia. Enjoy. We'll see you back in a few. We are back with our very special guest, Sevan Bomar, and you are listening to Truth Connections. Sevan, what are the signs of consciousness? Can you actually see in certain individuals how evolved their consciousness is when you talk to them or meet with them or what have you?
For sure. I mean, of course, to look deep into someone, you have to be able to look deep into yourself and extract the deeper metaphors. But it's really all in the eyes, because you can really do a lot of understanding where a person's coming from and where they've been from looking deep into their eyes and also honing in on their frequency. So generally, if a person says that they're very advanced, sometimes this is what accompanies, but not every time, because, I think in many tenses we've all have different levels of the path within us, and actually the entire path is contained with us. So it's really more about what we're accessing at that point. So in certain tenses, I would say, that you do have a noticeable phenomena that comes from people that are awake, but you also have this other phenomena that occurs with other individuals that you thought may never get awake. And then all of a sudden they're coming with massive levels of expansion that may even supersede where you are.
Excellent. I know I think it's a very important topic to discuss. Let's talk about sexuality in relationship to alchemy.
In alchemy, what you'll also notice is you'll notice that in the ancient times, when different vessels were constructed to perform the alchemical transmutation, those vessels were often shaped just like the organs that corresponded to that same transmutation taking place in our body. So to realize that the alchemists were only externalizing the processes that were going on in the body to uncover what was called the panuncia, which in males equals their semen, but basically to uncover the ability to implode all genes into a small organism and then to utilize that organism as a form of energy. So that's what alchemy really was, and that's why they talk about that alchemy came from the land of Kim, and that it had deeper mystical implications, and that once it made it into many of the Western cultures, Western societies, that the idea of what alchemy was externalized completely and lost altogether. And then what you get after that is these books that are written supposedly in some kind of code, speaking of red lions and things of this nature, and that being more of a debasement of what alchemy really is, in a sense of that it involves something on a grand spiritual level. But of course, this is the modern alchemy that's in play now, which is really more of a philosophical understanding or a Socratical understanding of this process of alchemy, more so than the identity of reincarnation and the actual process of a soul in its transition through different physical planes.
How does that tie into the relationship of the secret energy?
The Secret Energy, which is a website that I'm beginning, it's really like my personal blog. And the reason why I say it like that, because I have quite a few websites, but each of those websites, they're not overlapping. They're designed to specifically cater to some part of our spiritual expansion and our expansion of awareness of self. And I still felt like, though, that I come across this information, these different heavy levels of information all the time. And I would really like to keep people aware of that in real time. And what the Resistance platform is, because that's where I'm mainly active, especially with if you're trying to follow, the shows and what show I may be speaking on and things like that, then obviously you can get all that information from there. In addition to that, you have a whole community of 13,000, I believe 13,000 people now, all interacting about, what's being said and also their insight into spirituality. But I also feel like that it's also sometimes intrusive for me to begin blogging into the Resistance site. I tend to like the energy to be free flowing, to not, and I'll just explain it this way, like when you, as a person of bringing this kind of information, if you keep interacting with the platform over and over again all the time, you can kind of stunt people's growth because they just are like passing it to you, like, okay, what do you got and what do you got to say? So sometimes I just let the information sink in and do its work, and then the people start discussing on their own, and then they metamorphosize even grander thoughts without my intervention. And so that's also why I kind of have the Resistance now as a forum for collection of information of people through spiritual experiences, and the major hub of knowing what we're doing in real time with radio shows, etc. So this also has me wanting and already now starting this site called Secret Energy, which is at secretenergy.com. And what it is in real time, the information that I'm receiving from around my spiritual experience, around the web, whatever, spiritual, physical webs, who knows, and bringing the cream of that information all into one place to where people can start to just get that information. It's basically something that you may tune into at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning before you get ready to start the next part of your day after your meditation. You just want to get an update of what are the important things in the world, and then you want to actually see them for how they really are. So that's one part of Secret Energy, because it reveals secrets. And when secrets are revealed, they unlock energy. But then there's another part of Secret Energy where it goes into the most bona fide levels of cultivation. And that's because I have come across knowledge in my path that has allowed me to get to the original sources of a lot of what's become religion now. And so what I wanted is I wanted to open up different forums that discuss specific beliefs that I feel are the closest to being very accurate to the truth. And many of them have just been really found by the Western world, but have always been going on and have contained much more information that has never been translated into English. And so we work with efforts to get this information translated. And we're more like the spiritual WikiLeaks, if you may.
Sevan, tell us about some of the gifts that you've received personally from raising your consciousness.
As as I've come to grow more and more with the energy, I've gone through several phases of what the energy is capable of doing. And obviously you learn how to build energy more when you're cultivating that energy. And so this is the difference between whether you're looking for these powers to display to someone so that way you can project their future for them, i.e. reading their future, or you're looking to zap people with lightning. All these kind of things have an outward effect, and as we talked about, that's really the D effect. And so when you do that, you become drained. Notice that starts with a D. So what happens is when a person is drained, then they basically are, once they perform their energy or their power or whatever their display of this power that they've achieved, whenever they perform that, they always get weaker from there. And unless the person uses energies and these different kind of things. So what I'm saying is that the real states of spiritual consciousness do not have a high spiritual consciousness do not have as much to do with external phenomena, meaning things that are vividly witnessed on the external level from tricking people and doing things with magic with them. It has a lot more to do with the deeper levels of introspection of exactly what the reality consists of, and you having clear sight. In fact, that's really the only gift that one needs to really access is clear sight, because that's called dreaming true. It means that you see things as they really are, not as your deceptive way has made you believe they are. And so this is a big part of my expansion in a sense, where being able to instruct that. So the power, in a sense, somebody's looking for, the power is the ability to be able to translate what the abilities that don't even need to be discussed are able to extract. So rather than me sitting here talking about all day, the electricity that comes from the body and the heat, that's often generated that causes a slight levitation. These kind of things, and filling people's mind with those kind of things about myself, it's more important for me per se to get people more deeper into the processing of this information and the ability to even be able to do that for themselves. Because at the end of the day, experience, because all you're going to do in a sense is accumulate. If you tell people like all these powers and abilities you have, you're going to accumulate a lot of energies, because enemies, notice energies and enemies have a lot to do with each other, but you're going to accumulate these the wrong kind of energies. And these energies are diametrically opposed through jealousy, which of course the God of the Bible seems to display a lot, because they're still on that dominion template. So what happens is that when the jealousy ensues, which is, it's hatred, it's envy, the person is burning with passion against you, and this becomes a war. And so thus your angels fight their devils. And this is like again, your energy is involved in this kind of engagement. So you have to rein in your energies. You have to, for yourself personally, domesticate your animalistic forces within and allow them to be under control. So this is an integral part to the major advancement, or else all other perceived advancements, especially if it has something to do with magic in its true term with a K, is not a real advancement. It's actually debasement. And what ends up happening to the individual, if you see their karmic body, is the karmic body begins to become black and filled with toxins as the person is making in themselves pacts and agreements with animalistic spirits, because the passions of what they're going after they're not synonymous or harmonic with the frequency of expansion. They're more harmonic with the frequencies and the passions of the animalistic natures. So indeed, the animalistic forms will assist that person. And so when a person has a rider or a being that is also attached to them, generally in the animal form, that also helps them and assists them in different endeavors, mainly related to their ego.
In a spirit guide?
It can't be defined as that, although some have defined it as that, because also a spirit guide, generally, if you're looking at it in its highest tense, is the oversoul. It is the perfected version of you, meaning you back collected with everything that you are, which is everything. So if a person says, well, I have this wolf that I follow around and that's my spirit guide, then you can't, that's what they've defined it as. So spirit guides will be different for each individual. But these beings, or animalistic energies that do at times masquerade around as spiritual guides, do have in themselves their own agenda. And that's where we can kind of get caught off guard, because we don't think that there's any other beings here beside us and that there's any other stage of consciousness beside ours. And this is completely false, because there are energies that are working already in hives on the ethereal plane that utilize humans as vessels in order to carry out and further their deeds of placing themselves on different parts of the chain of the ecosystem. And then, of course, again, if you're dealing with physical planes and this is going on, if you have an animalistic guide, the guide is, what is the purpose of a guide initially people should think about? But obviously the purpose of a guide is to get you to a place that you have not explored. So how could that be done with the animalistic trait, which is a place that you've already explored? Because what this creates, and people need to understand, is that it creates something outside within. They're doing the same thing over again, but doing it inside, creating this other entity that is supposedly the one that's doing all this and all that. But in reality, it's just you. And then when you limit yourself, I'm this Hanuman, or Hanuman is my spirit guide. This is blind, because none of these beings are anything separate than we are. That is the maximized level of power. That is the maximized connectivity of our entire being. There's no more pantheism, meaning the movements of the sun as it pans across the sky. A pandemonium, or the pandemon, or Pan himself, meaning the Bacchus, or the bacteria that accumulates within the realities that hold the realities below the speed of light. Nighttime, to where fungus and molds and things are beginning to accumulate. Incubation, meaning being away from the full power of the sun, which is within. This would mean that the sun is within you and you're supposed to generate your own light. So again, that's why the powers that I'm talking about, because sometimes, we can confuse the two, but if you see the work that we put together, even the elements that we use, they're integral to causing things like working with your third eye, your celestial eye, building up your energy so that way you can begin to cause a higher synopsis. That way you can encase more memory, retaining memory after death. astral investment, being able to put your physical currency into things that you will be experiencing when you do leave this cortex or shell. So we're very selective about our approach at explaining these kind of dynamics to individuals about what they entail, just as this explanation is. So again, the external phenomena, floating, even healing, because you have to realize that healing, there's two different parts here. There's giving a person a knowledge in which they can heal themselves, because the healing, the ailment is a karmic result, or actually trying to do it for them and then now never allowing them to actually gain the lesson of what they're even involved in or what they're doing. Thus, you step in the way of their karma. And so it's best, again, for anyone who may be unclear on that, to give people the tools that are necessary to expand. But as far as using your own personal power and emissions coming from your body, from your own cultivation of chi, and many of the other energies to transfer from yourself into another person in order to rectify their illness, that is a very, very, very adept thing to do. And you need to be aware fully of who you're doing that to.
Yes.
Because you're attaching yourself to that individual. They are actually feeding on your energy at that point. And the whole laws behind this, it's called giving someone your gong. This is the term. Giving someone else your own gong causes a lot of responsibility, even that crosses across lifetimes. And this is why there was even a student-master relationship within many of the ancient traditions, because they would use Shakti, giving the gong, to some of the students that the master would think, oh, this is the student that needs to expand. And because of that, then the part of the master, his homunculus, his small body, would go inside of the disciple and remain with that disciple until it birthed or rendered it or gave it up. Okay, this means when you actually exceed the expansion of your master. So this is a thing that you can see within the transition of the chakra center, which I wanted to mention very briefly, and I think was one of our final questions. And that's the chakra centers. Then, if you want to use numbers, all have their 1 to 10s going on, and 10 being a composition of 1 and 0, or a pole and a whole. So with that, then that means that at a certain point when you're in a chakra, you can become a master of the root chakra. And then when it's time to go to the Manipura, that's when 7 has to meet 8. And that's what I wanted to get across to people, because a lot of times, again, they're trying to point at you and trying to connect it to you, because my stage name here happens to be Sevan or Sevan or whatever. But what I'm telling you is maybe I'm the master of that path of understanding how to turn it in. And that means that you actually realize that all the chakras go through their number system. So you come strong in the root chakra, and then you start displaying root chakra powers. This is dominant, especially from a physical level. This is being able to deal with toxicities to a different kind of level. Like, there are people, like many of the stars in Hollywood, they are using their root chakra and their netherworld chakras, generally inverted, most of the time locked, or themselves manipulated. The light is manipulated or crafted, or the facet is cut by those who know how to work the craft on them. So what happens is, though, is that when you have gone the other way, because that's obviously descension, that's the dove descending versus going up, ascending. So what happens is that when you get to the next chakra, though, the Manipura, it actually is another challenge. So maybe the previous chakra was, do you actually love or care, right? And then the next chakra may be, do you have courage? And then the next chakra may be, do you have integrity? So these things may be completely opposite. So you can't expect to go through the same levels of knowledge and experiences when you're getting ready to go into the next chakra. So many of the beings that are already aware of this choose not to go to the next chakra. That's what I was saying earlier. They choose to be the master of one particular chakra, display the power of that chakra, stay in their own zone, and then never try to come out of it. And thus, there's never anything new from them. Yeah. Like, they are repeating cycles over and over again. And that's what the books also talk about. They talk about the divas. And these are humans that are basically gotten to the level of being able to build a world, and they just stay in their world. And it's like you go there, it may be all beautiful and nice, but they're stuck. Their whole embodiment of who they are, they believe, is that world. And so this is, again, like, so when you go and you make the marriage, then you're agreeing for your world to no longer be just yours. That's why it's called a marriage, alchemical wedding. Now you must share your world with something new. And so this is when you connect the chakras. So now you're metamorphosizing from root chakra to Manipura. Now this, when I'm explaining, to most people it seems like a very slow process because they still have to go through each process in order to at least cycle their system or climb the ladder one time. But this is something that as it doesn't get harder as it goes, it actually gets more simpler. And then what occurs is everything begins to collapse. Like you actually start seeing the simplicity between all this information. Like I said, you can break it down to either you build or destroy. You either divide or you bring together. Like, which one are you? Are you both? Like, you know, you can get more to the goal of the questions that you need to be asking yourself. And so, you know, and that's what's up.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, to quote The Alchemist, it was stated that the simple things are also the most extraordinary things, and only the wise see them.
Indeed. Indeed, even as the text says that even Solomon gained all his wisdom from looking at bugs.
Interesting.
And he could determine based on the geometry that was in the bugs, the language of the different worlds.
The scarab symbology is something very interesting as well. So I wanted to talk about meditation in relationship to the third eye, because I think it would interest other people what we see in our third eye during meditation. For me, it's kind of evolved, from just seeing black and white imagery to more of a kaleidoscope type form, to geometry, to faces. I see ET faces sometimes. Sometimes I see faces that I can't really get into focus, and more recently colors. Like the other day I saw violet. Violet was like blobbing in from the from the right side of my third eye vision. What are some of the things that you see during meditation?
Well, during meditation, really I feel more than I see. I tend to shut down certain faculties in order to gain greater faculty. So to collapse hearing and seeing, meaning what am I seeing, what am I hearing? Because what happens is that you have to actually, this is all a process, so you even have to send this information across your mind, like, hey, do you see that color? Yes, that color is violet. So in that whole process, believe it or not, a great deal of energy is lost. So what I do is I collapse chakras, and then I can hear see. And then what hear see does is it brings me to the gate. And because the reason why I'm explaining this like this is because you can either play off in devacanic planes of the Kadmon world, that's a receiver, or you can go into new, which is you don't really know what's there, and nor are you really trying to define it. You just know that you're going to absorb and cultivate the energy there, and then when you come back, it's a panacea, so it actually can be used for anything that is necessary in this reality. So I even started learning this and hinting onto this even with things like Christian prayer, which I saw as erroneous. That why like prayer in itself is very destructive in a certain sense, because if you think about it, you can cultivate. So that means that you, instead of asking, like, who are you asking? Like, is there a re-information going on here with yourself then, since you understand this level? And that's why. And I'll make it very clear here. When you realize what your real position is as a supreme being, then you realize what prayer really is, which is actually causing something to prey on you based on what you're asking for. Because there are many things that will grant you what you're asking for a certain unit of current. And so when you ask for certain things, that's why I say be careful what you ask for, because when you're speaking in English, which corresponds to the beings called angels, which are a specific group of spiritual kind of beings, they can grant that because in a sense they're granting your passion. So it's kind of like they know what you want, so they know how to get what they want by dangling what you want in front of you. You see what I mean? So this whole game, that's the Loki side of this whole thing. That could go on for lifetimes of the person basically being a carrot dangled out in front of them by themselves. And they're just chasing this carrot, and they're the ones dangling the carrot out in front of themselves. This is the kind of madness that you would see on the astral plane in a sense if you were looking for physical metaphors of what's taking place in the reality. So if I want to see something back in the day and know how it works, I would see it like that in my astral sight. I would see that kind of interpretation of it. But then when I start collapsing the senses, it's almost like it's a check system. It literally is like, okay, it's like shutting down a craft more so than starting it up. It's saying, okay, all right, this one's down, this one's down, this one's down. Okay, we're shutting this one off. Okay, we're conserving power here. Okay, it's already ready. The time to kick off last thought. Last thought, are you ready? Yes, we're ready. Go ahead and disconnect us. Okay, you're disconnected. That's it. Now you're going into the zone. Okay, shut up. I can't go into the zone with you talking. Okay, bye. It's more like that. And so and then what happens then is that you're not putting your hands on it, because remember, the hands are the soul's external expression of wanting to experience. And it's using pentagrams, 5 senses, 5 fingers, etc., to try to experience. So it's using division. It's trying to actually divide the reality. And this is happening on a spiritual level in order to be able to understand it better. And that's when you're using the governor of the 5 senses. So when you're expanding into a higher state of consciousness in order to grasp where you are and what you have around you, you're coming out of that 5 sense level, so you don't use them. The reason to come out of something means to not use it. Even the Bible says, come out of her. So, you come out of it means you don't have a use for it anymore. And so this, of course, is the graduation of many different things, not only in our stage of consciousness. So as you see, I've just explained something that can happen on 3 different levels. It can happen on a spiritual level, it can happen on a physical level, and it can also happen on a mental level. Either way, if I press on with whatever it is, my system of study or whatever, to get to that point of where I'm able to get to the end of it, to see that the end is but the beginning, to unpack the pack of the fool that is on his back, still being the 0 card, and to get on the journey, to be able to do that, that's, what all this really entails. Like, it entails us seeing all of what I'm explaining as actually something that's happening, not a story. Not a fictitious, mythical thing that's just supposed to entertain us like He-Man or entertain us like the next episode of RoboCop. This it's something entirely different. And to fully grasp what it's really about, then you have to get into it. And so those who are trying to get it out to it, meaning the genie in the bottle, they're just looking for one thing to become the end-all, finish-all explanation. There's no end. So this creates more of a conundrum for people who are trying to look for the end of this. Like, we're telling you that we're going into the infinite. In the infinite, there's perpetual energy. There's no limitation of it. So this means that if you ask me, well, in a nutshell, what is all this about? It doesn't fit in a nutshell. That's what it's all about, because a nut is still a shell. Basically, the nutshell is still a shell. It's beyond shells and seeds. It's beyond the baby steps of what grander forms are. It's actually becoming the grander form. But remember, the parable of the sower works best here. And, again, I can break down this Bible and build it back up in different kind of ways. But I tell you the truth, the Bible is a hodgepodge of many ancient teachings all collaborated in one and then pointed to the company of Jesus. So some of those ancient teachings in there can be applied in every single thing in life and really do contain wisdom. But the one about the parable of the seeds is the sower. Is really the bird, the seed, and the sower. That's exactly those positions and those roles you need to understand, especially even the roles of the birds or these angels or bards, because that's what they really are, like the druids. Those who practice druidic magic in the wrong direction, which is quite dangerous. But that whole connection, what I'm saying is that as a seed, that there are birds that try to eat the seeds. And then other animals eat seeds too, especially in different stages. So just remember that until you become the seed that is impenetrable, and that's what there's seeds that even when the earth becomes superheated, and it will, this is billions of years in the future. Most people say, well, I won't be there. Yeah, you will. We live forever. So the reality is when the earth is superheated, and it will be, there are still seeds that once the whole thing starts cooling off again, they start poking their heads out. Go to Geographic, they'll tell you that there are seeds that can survive lava. And then they just sit there and they're so compressed. And this is the geometry of phi. So compressed that the actual living organism inside is not affected by the torrential chaos on the outside. So there's power in this. We just need to understand that power, when misused, creates monsters. Because then what you do is you bring this phenomenal energy into your limited state of consciousness. It's just running around the small worlds of the chakra centers that you've unlocked thus far. Still remembering that the chakra centers develop The first 3 chakras, if you want to denote numbers, develop naturally. The next 4 chakras may never develop on certain individuals if they don't go through the scenarios that develop that chakra. Crown chakra is a award, meaning that that's a reward to be able to have a crown chakra. It means that you actually climbed up to the highest level on the ladder to develop and to build your higher stage of consciousness. And then guess what? And now I can conclude, even come close to the conclusion with this. Remember, some are still in the crown chakra and didn't remember 7. Has to go to 8. So they still on the crown chakra, because now, see, it's even more of a test. This is what I'm trying to explain to people, is that these more power, more ability, more expansion, bigger fish tank is even more of a test if you're going to give up fish tank A for fish tank B. And it's a real thing for people. Like, they don't realize that the reason why they're stuck here on Earth is because they refuse to give up what's going on here in hope of something greater, because they don't believe anymore that there's anything greater, because they're depending on something that's not even communicating and talking to them. Whether it's an atheist or whether it's a person who believes in God, they're both the same to me, because the amount of communication going on is still null and void. You can't have a relationship and a friendship with something if it's not talking to you and communicating with you. But guess what? This will prove again that you're the supreme being, i.e. God. You're generally talking to yourself more than anyone's talking to you. You're always consoling yourself and telling yourself what you need to be doing.
Isn't that the truth?
Right? That's God. That's the one who's more concerned about what you're going to be doing from one moment to the next. That's always with you, that will never forsake you, etc., etc., etc. So, it's time for the priorities, because that's when we turn the energy back in. And that's also, if you've seen it as a metaphor or a diagram, what the company of Jesus has done is make everyone point their energy outside. And then it goes into chalices and vessels and different things that they've created to capture the energy. Just like a Buddha statue can hold energy. So bronze also holds energy. Like, see, there's certain metals that hold energies that are close to the same energies that humans emit. And then there's other metals that are really far away from the same kind of energy that we're emitting on this 3-dimensional plane. So it's the same thing with the difference between IV and marijuana. You can go and smoke some marijuana, but go smoke some IV and tell me what happens. It's because marijuana is kind of closer to where you're at, because cannabis is Anubis. People never realize what George Soros has done with the release of all the weed. You have sorcerers releasing weed because they can manipulate consciousness. Weed is something you have to be very powerful mentally to be able to deal with. You need to be an OG in there. And most of these people just start smoking weed. They ain't OGs. They're over here paranoid, in fear, open for a moment, then extremely closed. That's the process of what this cannabis does. But again, cannabis is Anubis. If you don't understand the connection between the passions of the heat and the fire of the root, which is connected to the dog snake, because it's not just a dog, it's also a snake. And you look at the alchemical diagrams from the East, they'll show you that the dogs and the snakes are the ones who rule the netherworlds. So so you're dealing with, again, that kind of energy in amplification for a moment and then collapse. And then obviously the person's energy is not in the stage of consciousness to be able to expand into what's really going on. What they're expanding into, what is, oh no, weed opens the mind. But to what? What was your last contemplation last time you really smoked one? Was it really, really that close to what I'm talking about right now? Because this is the real part of it. And then maybe if you can analyze what you're thinking, that may let you know what it's actually doing for you. So what I'm saying is that everything before entering our body must go through customs, right? And so what is customs? That's your codes, your rules, your ethics, your decrees, your protocols, right? So because when somebody come across customs, who doesn't generally get across customs very well? Aliens. Okay, so what are aliens? Aliens are life forms that are foreign to your system. So what happens if you got customs set up at every single port or portal or chakra center that reality interfaces with you, there are guardians there. So thus, passcodes must be spoken, meaning before you let a person in the chakra, they need to prove that they understand that chakra and how to operate there. Before they board your world, you need to know that they can follow your custom. So customs checks borders. This is why this blueprint in this world is only a copy, and a very bad one, mind you, still enough to read though, but a copy of greater worlds. right? And it's all the template, it's all the wheel. And so that's how also, if you want to understand how to navigate the system, because it's not about being higher or being lower, it's about staying on the move. The letter B, mobile wealth, bovid, meaning auroch that can move. The auroch, is the one that is stationed. B is a bovid, meaning mobile wealth. This means that you can actually utilize your energy on the go. Most people are still in the auroch phase because they have to sit in a cubicle to make money. They have to sit and go some specific place and remain there to make money, or stay in a small radius to make money, current, okay? To make energy, they must stay confined to a small area. If you can make energy everywhere you go, you move up to the next level, B. You see what I mean? And so this is how the letters and numbers and shapes and colors and all this do connect into each other. But it's
that's how the Kundalini travels up the spine as well, through the chakra systems.
Exactly, it travels through the chakra systems, and each coming through those portals and getting ready to make their marriage or conversion into the next stage of their energy. And then the interesting part is, each time it goes through, it's always producing something different. Like, it's actually not, because each time it comes through as a collective of every place it's been. So some people think, okay, when I get back in the root chakra again, it's going to be, you're not going to know what it's going to be, because you're going to be, if you want to use chakras, bringing all 7 chakras into the root chakra. So this is synonymous with bringing higher beings into the lower worlds to get ready to do their work, clean up. You see what I mean? So in this, which should manifest also, and this is something that I'm also involved in, this manifests also on the physical plane. Physical plane is the check safe. It is the shadow. It's the check safe of what we're actually carrying out on the spiritual dimension. So if we're saying we've aligned with all these beings that are helping the universe, you should see beings that are helping the universe physically around you. That's what I say, dream true. Don't be a fool. Like, if you don't see it in physical reality, in its physical correspondence, it does not really exist, because it hasn't come into the field of existence. Not that it can't exist, but just because it's still a child where it is. So this is like an idea that's still just an idea. You haven't actually bought it into the physical reality yet, or bought life into it. So, of course, there is still a field where all these ideas exist. And so if you go into that field, you'll see weird worlds. There are worlds missing certain things. It's quite phenomenal, but the reality is that every time we create something and it's not perfect, or we say something and it's not the way we want to say it, we still need to realize that it doesn't mean that it's not coming into life, and it doesn't mean that there's not some other being that doesn't have such great expectations as we do, like an electron that can just go and live in it. You see what I mean? Like, they talk about an electron. You squirt an electron right in the center of the water, the mitosis phase starts off from nowhere. Like, somebody literally opened up a portal. And it's because the expectation of life is only water. These are beings that say, shoot, you bring me water and that's all I need. I don't need anything else. But we're like, okay, I need iPhone. I need. And this creates a complex beings. And then we think that complexity is power, but complexity is division. Division is the opposite of power. So when we want to ask who's more stronger, we're asking the wrong questions. The real goal is just to get to work. And so this is, again, and I probably start docking this thing now for people to still realize there was a lot talked about here today. There was a lot shared, probably more than even last recording. You know, that's obviously what we always do.
Covered a lot of ground, certainly.
We covered tons of ground. But I still want people to realize, because there's a lot, and sometimes some people may get a little headache, or some may be too much and overwhelming. Remember, you're still a soul. So what happens is, at the end of the day, the Kadmon world was built after the Big Bang. So all of what I'm explaining to you, all the drama and who was involved, and it becomes nice campfire tales. But at the end of the day, when you're ready to eject from this thing, you're going to have to go into the solace and collapse all this stuff and quiet it down. And how you do that is you realize that you come out, as Dr. Enroll said, you come out of the tin. He was saying that you come out of the Kadmon, the tin body, the tin man. You have to come out of that. And then that's when you've released from that vessel, those identities, all those things that cause you to think. And you'll know if you truly release from it, because there won't be any thoughts. If you haven't released from it yet, there'll be a lot of thoughts. And then you'll tap into this other part, that's the zone. And the zone doesn't use English. That's how you'll know you're there. And so I definitely wanted to say wholeness and balanced vibrations to everyone. Obviously, we could talk for years if we wanted to, and we would still never cover the entire thing. But at the same time, we would, because we would use this blueprint, which can give you answers to anything that you seek in life, to look within, to look in the design within yourself. And all these platforms, again, the astralquest.com and astralquest.tv, resistance2010.com, and even realmdynamics.com. And you see, because I can throw up 5 very proficient websites within a short period of time just to assist other people. But the reason why is because my energy is open source. I'm not expecting something back, because when you're expecting something, you can be let down.
Yeah.
When you're not expecting something, nothing can let you down, because then what happens is that if you're expecting something, you're only looking for the letdown. And so this is not in action. So this is waiting to receive a letdown. And so then once you get let down or something happens, then you stop building. But who suffers? You.
Your innerverse.
Right?
Suffers.
And our innerverse. And the other people who didn't get a chance to see what you were going to build. So this is what I was saying about the universe. For us to really realize the universe's identity and stance on all of this is that the universe can roll out lessons and experiences and produce and all these kind of stuff all simultaneously. And it doesn't even have to mean that it was good for you, because in the end, it's all good. Meaning that every single thing you experience, whether ye call it positive or negative, will serve to become the foundation in which you stand on to gain a greater state of projection within your experience here as not only a human, but as everything. And whether we can handle that or not, because it's just like a child. You spank the child and the child doesn't even understand why you're spanking it. We don't still realize that some of these spankings are still going on. And they have a lot to do with our ignorance. Because once we wisen up to the real situation, as we say, actuality, then all of what we call punishment dissipates almost immediately. So if there is any real promise to all of this, it is the law of physics, laws of nature, etc., that prove that once you raise your frequency and then become harmonic, that other forces that are not in harmony with your frequency can't even see you, let alone touch you.
They cannot touch what is divine.
Exactly.
Well, I think that we certainly got a lot out there. We tried to keep it fresh for your following, and on the elementary side, to paint a good picture for your new following that you'll get from the Truth Connections audience. And knowledge is something definitely that is built upon, and that's what YouTube is good for. You can go back and listen to it if you need to digest it again.
Right, and
Sevan,
don't try to eat at once, because you try to eat at once, and here's the riddle: he tried to ate at once, ate at one, and end up becoming full. Some people get up from the table and say, "I'm full," but FULL, FOOL, and that's synonymous because the real knowledge is that if you fill your body up with too much food, then your root chakra actually can't process it. It's just too much for it to process. And so also remember there's the 9, which is perpetual energy. Like after the promise is right there within the process. The 9 taps you into perpetual energy. Then the perpetual energy allows you to see the 10. It allows you to see, whoa, pulling a hole. It's all me. Like I got all this stuff. I'm androgyne over here. And then there's a lot of discrediting going on to the androgyne. And I think this either come from man haters and woman haters or whatever. But again, are you accepting it or not? Because realistically, it's in math. Eventually, they even tell you in the Bible, woman came out of man. Who cares who came out of who? That means that both of one was inside the other. And that will be the deepest answer to all the riddles, again, is that to understand that, diving into Phi, because if you look at even the Mason card of the Fool, which shows you the Fool, he's walking down Phi. They actually draw it there and everything, because what they're saying is that Fool is actually continuously plunging into his own womb. And so what that is that when you go into the womb of the planet via the planet's representation, the female, you come out again. and then you may come actually out as female. Then your other self, which is just another person in reality, will plunge back into you, and then everyone is actually searching for you. So the reason why we're actually plunging through time is we're looking for ourselves. Like, think about it. It's a deeper thing, but we need to understand that our whole pursuit here is because we're trying to really find self. Now, isn't that what you go to Tony Robbins and he'll put it a whole nother way? Right. But the reality is that's what they're saying is, all this whole quest and all this is trying to find self. So, this is one of the actions that we've been making, this reproduction, and trying to find a perfected version of ourselves. But notice how we can get the kids for a moment, and at a certain point, especially if there's more than one kid, we have no choice, or child, but we have no choice but to go in and start to take care of the other child. And we don't even have the capacity to manage all of our children. And this is because the one who really manages the children in the ancient cultures is grandma. And grandma is the planet. Forget grandma that's now missing from the household because we've broke the custom, which is to take care of our elders, and they should be in the house with us, even no matter how much they annoy us. In fact, back in the day, they wouldn't annoy you because they actually had real knowledge themselves. So they would give you all the deep knowledge about everything that was going to happen. You see what I mean? And then when they died, they would still be with you. You would hear them in your conscience in the same voice and vibration in which they spoke here, saying, don't worry, I'm not gone, I'm right here. But I can also even help you better from here because I can see more. So that's also where we talked about the dividing sign. The division sign also means the cutoff of the spiritual worlds where one could talk to their ancestor because their ancestor is them. How could someone take away from you and tell you, it's mumbo jumbo, it's magic, it's blah, blah, blah. Look, that's great, 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 great grandma. So if you don't think that she has something to say or we need to talk again, then you're lost. That's my new term. It's like, you're lost. Like, I understand a lot of people are lost here. And this is also where us as teachers need to get more adept at how we're dealing with people, because when you're dealing with a phenomenon, you're in this namaste, love and light type mood, and then someone goes against completely how things work, and they're trying to incorporate you in it. You need to be able to really, really deal with yourself properly in that situation, especially not in expelling all of your spiritual energy that you've cultivated on this idiot or troll that is sitting here trying to unseat just your state of consciousness. It's like, these people don't have anything to do all day, so even messing with you is the high of their life. So remember, like right now we're dealing with when a person says they're a teacher and they're really not a teacher. But back in the day, you can't really say anything that you really weren't. So as a real teacher, to teach something means you already have to know it. So this is literally an agreement to go back over something that you've already been through. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? And so this is a sacrifice because just from a level from spiritual, you're basically taking yourself back into the fire again. Like the more you go south, and that's what I started realizing about the whole big thing. When you go south, those areas have already been, it is the netherworld, like it's the past. And it's like still suffering from the infestation and toxification of the energies that are there, which have a tendency to be serpentine. And it's just a phenomenon. It's like, notice on any real cult symbol of the Ouroboros, you see really two snakes, where you see one snake on the bottom and it doesn't have wings. And this is a signification, that's actually worm, but it's a signification that on the lower levels, per se, then it is us, but it's us without the graduated state of consciousness that creates the higher level. And that when you go down there, it works like fermentation or mineralization or decayed matter to plants. But if you were to examine the situation, it'd be likened unto bacteria and infection and virus and war and the confusion. And then it spreads. And it spreads up the body. And that's why you notice how in the lower parts of the body, all of the waste and everything, that's where it is. That's where it's processed. So that's the same thing with the south of this world, is that most of all the negative energy and all that kind of stuff is being processed and cultivated there. But it's being put into the mouth from the northern world, which is obviously the United States, Hollywood, all these places, because Hollywood is right across from Egypt. So it's a strange phenomenon. Like I found more entertainment with it than, I stopped beating myself up about it because, sometimes, like I said, you got to realize that, hey, you're still in that program world of drama. So it's going to be whatever you can think of it. You're going to be able to find a place where it's actually happened because there's just been so many stars that have come across this part of the galaxy and put their foot in it. you know what I mean, and put their footprint or fingerprint on it, and then went on about their whole evolution or de-evolution, depending upon, you know, which direction they figure they were headed in. And so my thing is to, like, I have to also sometimes separate my consciousness from the hive when the hive chooses to remain stuck, and then go beyond and say to myself that it's okay to find a more expanded route beyond this stage of consciousness. Because in the hive, the overall concept, the hive that most people are in, the overall concept is that it is not okay to leave that normal state of thought, that zone, that field, that frequency. And that's a real battle that, you know, when you go deeper into these systems of your own self, you see that program just as clear as like when you're on the Dimitri and the third eye comes open and you see the webs, you see the colors that are associated with them, you see how intrusive they are. They're like colors humping your face. And the light is so immense. The external light is overwhelming. This is why you know that in the external world that people have been blinded by the solar light, the sun, like on a literal level, like, yeah, it can dwarf a person by letting them think that there's something greater. But on a much more deeper level, like, it's so bright. For a being with a third eye, your third eye will close during the daytime, most like any time, because it's just too bright. So then you realize that obviously in the darkness, when you go into this substance and the third eye opens, you see all these lights. And then and these lights are being projected directly from your own skull, proving that you have some kind of bioluminescent phenomena or some capability of bioluminescent phenomena from your own mind.
I'm fully convinced, Sevan, that any animal in the ocean that is bioluminescent was brought from some extraterrestrial place, because you know that jellyfish symbol keeps coming up over and over again in my head, and you even see it with some anomalies in the sky, you know, and it just seems to be a very important symbol to ponder, you know.
Well, I think it gets a lot into the chthonic traditions, and the chthonic traditions of them talking about these creatures in the sea. And obviously, this is knowledge that was taken from the book of Al-Hazred and then falls into the hands of the Western culture, and then they exoteric the whole thing, and then it just becomes a monster's tale of squid-faced monsters. But there is indeed a connection between the squiddies on the Matrix and what I don't know if they're drones, as far as what their purpose is, but they look like mother brains, meaning that they are actually squid creatures, and they appear in rows, like they themselves are going from house to house to house. And you can see this when you're utilizing the third eye, and that's why, like, the third eye, see, a lot of people think that they're using their third eye and they're just into this whole pride ego thing, and they're not. And then other people who think they have sight are actually looking in through one of their lower chakras. So in most tense, they actually, if they see anything physical here on this dimension, or what we would call physical with their eyes, it is going to be a monster, because they're looking from the area in which monsters exist, the geometry that corresponds to what we call monsters. And believe it or not, and just to clarify what a monster really is, or a moon star, is a monster is a being that is so strong, it is terrible. It is a primordial being, so it's connected more to an elemental, right? And these primordial stages of consciousness are so strong and all-pervading that they make up the petri dish or the culture that we grow our greater thoughts from. So what also happens, though, is that if you notice, there's a metaphor here between, and I talked about it before, but the chariot and the rider and the horse, because this is a symbol of three different beings that have come into agreement with one another in order to travel through time. Because the chariot obviously is what's going to carry the rider, right? And then the chariot's going nowhere without the horse, though. And then man, you see what I mean, or woman. So this is a deeper level of how even our dimensions, because as Michael Jackson said, ABC, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Because in the real high levels of knowledge, 1 to 9 does not apply. 1 to 10 does not apply. 1 to 7 does not apply. 1 to 3 does apply. Because 1 to 3 is the ancient knowledge of the triangle, and the triangle is the delta. And it's just like Stargate with that whole story about that delta. It goes all across the universe, especially when it's concave or convex. This is when what you would see as the straight line sides on the triangle are bowed. Because when that happens, which creates the 528 Hz field, there's a whole nother level of communication established, an actual harmonic. Meaning you're the bridge now. 528 Hz is the harmonic, or the place in which all frequencies converge and are able to communicate. So this is why when you open the third eye, you see the field of communication, because if you can get that chakra open, if you have that one unlocked, it's like an RPG. But if you have that one unlocked, then what happens is that the cornucopic field meshes over the reality. And then at that point, you see the spaces within spaces, because all the spaces have now collapsed on themselves. So this is a weird phenomenon, even for the beings that are in the other spaces, which at times they're the hives of the insects, animal hives, and these kind of things. And then because if any of them are around you, like an animal or an insect or whatever, especially when the third eye's open, because you can actually see all of them. Like even if you're in the grass and you're standing on the grass and you look at the grass, every single insect, every single everything you can actually see. And then you're wondering, this is not a hallucination, because if you go down there, you pick up one, you pick it up. So this is like advanced vision, okay? And then what happens is that so the 528 Hz, so once you kind of like interact with whatever hive is there, it is actually startled for a moment, as if something appeared that wasn't there. And it feels it somehow like an energy signature. I don't think it sees you based on like how we see each other physically. Sight is something else when you're dealing with different scopes in the eye, et cetera, different dimensions. Like sights are more senses, okay? So it senses something, and then you can see everything respond. And then you can also see other entities and it just all depends on where you are, because you'll find out very fast that all real benevolent forces that are still here but on other frequencies don't build their worlds anywhere where man has built anything. And this is why the Indigenous kept their areas free of any of our craft work, in order to keep certain energies around. And this is, another level of this, how this whole thing is really put together. But if you really want to know, like there are kingdoms, or I don't even want to use that term because there's no kings there, but there are worlds, which I can't even use that word because there's no words there, and words are worlds, but you get my drift. There are places where the perfection in itself and the geometry in which is being used is expanded because they've gone into transparency. And transparency means that's 8. You see, because what happens is that everything about you, and this is really where I started with this whole mission, everything about you, everyone has to know. That's why I told people, hey, I've been in trouble in my past, and all these different things. Because I knew later on, that's the reality. That's where the transformation took place. I was ready to burst into the next chakra. But again, so this process, it's like the same thing that I keep talking about over and over, and it's about committing this old character and realizing the next stage. And if you're really wanting it to come, it means the old character has to go. This is not a game, because we're in this kind of field. Most people are in this field where they say, "Oh, this sounds great. Yeah, I'm going to want to do that. I'm doing that." But every day when you wake up and you look at yourself, there's been no changes. And so how do you truly change a character? Because that's the big question that we have to start addressing to ourselves with courage. Because this is where the whole fear thing really is. It's not about an external adventure into some cave and with dragons and monsters. It's about inside into the corpus callosum where it's all burnt out and the world is dead. You know what I mean? Like it's about going back through all of what destroyed that in order to replenish it and to grow it again. And so, this is why, it's called the Innerverse. This is why we call it the Astral Quest. Because we point it back in. And then, it takes us on stuff that we can even get deeper and deeper. And there won't be no limit to this, because I think somebody even said, like, the last show was so potent on the radio. They were like, man, you brought it all out. Then, man, you must don't have no more left. You're at the pinky finger. And I'm not even that far yet. Meaning that from what I got, most people are still at the pinky finger. For how much what there really is, there's really no measurement. In fact, it wasn't a language, it wasn't knowledge, this power, because I can tell people very well about it because I ran smack dab into it. Like I was actually one of those people who decided that I was going to find out where the power was. And I almost got burned really bad because when you're playing with things or dealing with things, that's all that I call it, playing again, because you're in the orchestra. But when you're playing with things that you don't even think it works. You read it was potent, you know it's potent, or actually don't know it's potent. You read it was potent, but you don't have any respect for it. And this is what happens in the Western world, right? Because there's things, especially mantra, that it doesn't respect that. Like it doesn't care about you not being ready to go and you not knowing what you're doing and all that. If it found its way into your hands, it's about to run its course. And so what happened to me is that I went through a very accelerated version of awakening. Like I actually rose my Kundalini through mantra. And it wasn't even really something that I was thinking about doing, meaning that I actually wasn't on this at that point in my life, because I had done that in the past, I'm going to learn about spirituality and I'm going to find spirituality in the whole external pursuit. Actually, I was involved in an experiment with ultraviolet, and that may have been more connected to why I decided to go inwardly, because ultraviolet brings you to the highest color of the spectrum and it speeds things up to allow you to see your own future. But don't think just because you're going to see your future, you're going to see something great unless you're great. For a great person, everything is great. And you'll know if you've reached that stage, because then everything around you will feel great. There will be no complaints. There'll be none of that. But they tell you very deeply in these Eastern books that can only be achieved within. That it's not something that you can ever cause on from some external phenomena based on how people are treating you around you, no matter how close they are, and what your house looks like and how much money you have and all these kind of things. It will never be like that. It has to be within. And so that's the path that I started. I cashed in all of my old life and I gave it all away and I liquidated it. And I created an equation that's very difficult to actually to put into formulation, but actually reverses karma. And this was by, again, getting rid of everything that I had when I had something, not when you have nothing. Because this is a difference. You know, obviously a lot of people, if they get a lot of things, they'll easily give you something because, after all, they got a lot. And then other people, if they don't really have anything, they don't really give you anything either. But they're so willing to risk it all because there's nothing else. They don't have anything anyway. So there was a statement that came up on a Kate show just recently, so I'm glad we're getting to this because it does need to be addressed. It needs to be addressed with a lot of these people who actually think that I'm some kind of game or joke and can be played with in any kind of way. And it's just about... First of all, when I came into this, because some people think that this is about money, or I think it's only really one person, so I guess I'm addressing that person and other people who heard that person and may have getting that in their mind. That first of all, when I came into this, I actually came away from money. Like I had money already, and it was going really well. And then when I went through the awakening, it was so aggressive. If you can imagine, one of the guys that I met way later on said, man, you did the equivalent of like letting God loose inside of your body. It's like a nuclear weapon inside of your body. And this is why it can destroy you. And many people have been destroyed by it. It's called this Kundalini syndrome. It's called the God syndrome. It's called the Jerusalem syndrome. This is when you don't think that it really works. You think it's all really a game. And then you end up saying or doing something that causes an energetic upheaval, meaning that you actually start going into a higher energetic stage and you can't stop it. And it may have seemed fun at first, but then when you realize you don't have any control of it, it's terrifying. And most people, it go in a shock. It's like a spiritual shock, and they never come back. They just either keep repeating the same words over and over again. They're even saying now that there's a new disease called PANS, how ironic, PANS syndrome that causes this spontaneously after an individual has been infected by something like strep. So meaning it's easier the possessions are occurring more easier because the bodies are getting weaker and they're able to be breached. Because the same thing that's keeping them out is also keeping you in. So this is the metaphor between the pentagram. Like the pentagram is a shell. A shell is a shield. It protects. It is the husk that the mother chose to put us inside of in order to keep us from being mined. Because it only can come through our minds. So then what happens is that this shield, this husk, when you're ready to emancipate, you think you're ready to deal with everything in the knowledge that you are everything outside of the real womb, outside of the matrix. then you have to birth at that point, right? And this is where many people feel like they are. They feel like they're big enough. They've experienced everything here. But here's the thing. Wrong. You haven't even gone into nature yet. Nature renders forth hundreds of thousands of plants with different molecules and different combinations of those molecules, each spanning into different stages of learning. That the trees were the teachers. That's why even today, trees remain as the wood and the paper that we use to write things and write on. The pen is more powerful than the sword, my lord, meaning that the first time man began to write and woman began to write, they began to have other ways of remembering what normally was forgotten, mainly the ancestors, and that the ancestors, or the arc primordial tones and vibrations, were in and kept, especially in Kemet. That was the original alchemy, in which the words were pronounced in order to bring forth the vessels, meaning I have the words, bring forth I have the vessels, bring forth the energy, meaning an actual art of being able to pronounce words that create physical bodies that spirits in this case, spirits are. When the piece of the soul is pulled off and thinks that it's individual, it becomes a spirit. Then the spirit becomes attracted to the flaming vessel or the chalice of the bodies, and then it goes into the body, and then that's the whole act. That was when the fallen angels were told not to go down into the lower worlds, and they went down there because of who? The women. The women of man. Man means material. It doesn't have anything to do with a genderization. It means flesh. So these be Amazons. Like that's what this whole planet was before this last segment, the Parthogenic. Parthogenic beings, i.e. Amazon, androgynon, that can birth their own children until spirits, beings divided from the soul, actually decide in their masculine straight ray form that they're going to go and incubate those wombs and actually create their own worlds or words. And then from that point, what occurs is error, time. Because the first son that was born, Cain, who is a king, the first king, the horned one, once birthed, was terrible because the parents committed the act that they didn't even know what it was about through suggestion of the serpent, who is who is sex. So that was the act of when you do it, ye shall surely die, or divide, meaning split yourself into two, make a baby. And then once the babies start coming, if you don't know how to take care of the babies, then the babies start degenerating, and thus the chain and the link between us and the Supreme becomes broken. That's the DNA. And then someone then must climb back up the ladder of the spine, the one who knows the tones and vibrations of the cone. That's Enoch. Must bring forth a plight to the great one, the holy one. This is the one in the crown and the stage of the consciousness of the exalted mind. It must bring forth that plight and plea of the fallen angels to return. Supposedly, as the Bible starts to pick up from there, it says that plea was declined. Nay, that plea was accepted. That if the human being wished to ascend the ladder, again, it is their right for them to understand we do not ascend, we descend. We didn't come from apes. We were from above. Yeah. We can descend into apes. We can descend into insects. And we would sometimes do it together for fun. That's what people are not getting about this. And you got trapped in the body. Not everyone is trapped, though. And then even us here, like we're in this weird stage of mind because we've been abused. So we're like spiritual beings with physical bodies that are really souls that, it's a loss of identity. Our culture, our petri dish has been disheveled. You got people with stories, that's why you have to go back to the origin point, because somebody will even try to tell you that you don't have a history, that you don't have ancient people, or even that other people are responsible for why you're here. They'll get into the drama. And that's what I say. The dragon mother is all of the specks across time after the Big Bang. Meaning the Big Bang, it's sexual. It's all sexually related. The Big Bang was when there was an act that caused division. And then from that point, how the division spreads across time is what actually creates time. So as we glide through it, when we're gliding by one planet or gliding by another, all of these places are emitting frequencies. And if we don't have the way to firewall our mind, okay? Which I'm sure, like, if you look at some of the advanced cultures, that's probably the purpose of many of these helmets, kufis, these different kind of things that keep certain parts of your body from being interfaced with, especially when the calculations of the parallax showed you that there was going to be, like, I guess the parable Jesus says, surely if you can look at the sky and tell there's going to be rain, why can't you tell where you're going? But realistically, serious, there's a way to look at time, especially since you all know it's a circle, you know it's your body. Once you study this deeply and you pinpoint or triangulate exactly where you are, you know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's the beginning of controlling time. So with my abilities, and this was even before the more massive upgrade, it encompassed dreaming the next day. That each night I would dream the next day. And I lived like that for a while. It was rather strange because you kind of already knew what was going to happen. But because there was nothing really going on much in my life, because I had really canceled out a lot of any externalization, I kept my mind constantly focused on the grand creation or the grand form. And I just would, any time of finding my mind idle, snatch it back into asking it, what do you think that the grand form is doing right now? And this is like, crawling before walking, because this is really what the purpose of, again, I'm not recommending mantras, but remember, they're simple intonations that do help the chakras. But a mantra, like for me the other day, the mantra was the word boundless. Because to me, it means no certifications, no passports, no IDs, no borders, no kings, no nothing. So every time I caught my mind wandering, I would just say, hey, boundless. And then when I needed extra energy in the workout, hey, boundless. Because then you start realizing that the more that you believe in yourself, you start to well up this immense level of energy. And it only really goes out when you start to either display it in the wrong way or spray it out onto something that is not fertile ground. That sounds interesting. But anyway, that's really what it's about. If you spray out your ideas onto non-fertile soil or onto something that doesn't have the cultivation power or process within it or whatever, you know what I mean. If you put the seeds of your ideas or your physical seeds inside or whatever onto something that's not going to cultivate it, you have committed really the greatest act of injustice, the act of division, of not respecting life. Because obviously division is non-life, okay? So not respecting life means to go into division. And so this is something that I can also see even in this state of intellect and thought why there was a necessity for. That's when you get into the crown of your state of consciousness. When you actually see that when something is so potent that even you can't give it to your children. Like it's got to be divided. Like you got to cut it down. This becomes a solution to an action that has already taken place. And if we don't realize that, hey, you're making decisions every day that are affecting what goes on the next day. So everything that happened in the past is a part of what's going on now. So somebody did some things, or whoever you want to call them, they did some things. And right now we're reaping that. And the moment that someone grabs the wheel and says, instead of trying to figure out who to blame about this, get this big ship under control, then the better off we'll all be. I can guarantee that. But here's the thing also is to realize this, because so many people think that they don't have the ability to do this. Big ship, small rudder. That's the mantra.
That's a very good synopsis.
Big ship, small rudder. The small affect the great. Like you'll read this in some of the deepest books. I've had some opportunity to read some stuff. You open it and the page may start crumbling on you. But you just can read the words right there that say the small affect the great. It says the sun is hot in midday, meaning that if you are trying to accomplish something but you're going against it at midday, forget it. You're going to be exhausted. Travel by night or early morning. So these kind of wise sayings meant something else, and only to the mind that has the depth of perception, their interpretation extracts that real meaning. Okay, so listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying that it doesn't matter what a person is saying or talking about and what order they're putting these words and letters and numbers in. The extractor can get right to the core of what is meant by what is being represented and said. So this then lets everything become a mirror. You only can see the depth of the meaning of life when you get that deep. So it's judges, the judging system is built in. You don't need anyone personally to be over you, some priest or some god or whatever. The judging system is built in until you actually achieve what it is that you need to achieve here, whatever you came for, whatever you set out to do, basically not running from everything all the time. Then the scenarios will take place for you to come into more realization of that. And so that's why everyone's trying to go and I'm trying to stay. That's why people think it's in the sky and I know it's inside. My greatest power, if people want to know it or not, my greatest power is knowing that if anything is to be produced, it will come from me. But I am all. All is self. These are the mantras. All is self. This is the highest maxim. No matter how long it takes me to realize that all this stuff is me, that will be my sentence. That will be my conviction. That will weigh on my heart. That will allow when my heart is weighed against the feather or the bird, in order to reach its magnetic state, if I'm not on those scales properly, then I'll become once again a Nubian, meaning the actual stage of the dark matter, the womb Canaan himself, a.k.a. the black dog. Because why people are still running around playing like they know about this occult stuff, I don't even understand what they're reading, who they're talking to, or any of that. Because this cult is very, very explicit and very direct about what they are involved in and how it all works. And it's just a riddle. Because Canine, who's Canaan, is a black dog. The black dog is the one that they love, or Amor. This black dog is the one that is from Venus. Like if you notice, it means Caliph or Caleb. These words mean the dog. And this is because who's man's best friend? See, this stuff really does mean something, but people need to realize that all the wombs, whether like the Indus Valley people, they were using the cow, they were using the Taurus. They came from the 7 sisters. Some decided to use the Caleb. They decided to actually use Cain as a way in order to bring themselves into the dimension. And that's what dogs are. They're Cain. Some some were hominids. This is what Akhenaten was. Hominids in their evolutionary stage, meaning okay, this will make it all easy. Notice what do you think the monkey is on another level? And some people say, well, what do you think? He's just a monkey. Okay. Then what do you think you are on another level? Just a human? So anyone here in this audience who's had some spiritual interactions knows that what we pretend to be all day is not who we really are. So is this story somehow odd to believe is true for the monkey? And that the monkey, when she's in another stage of consciousness, is actually a 10 or a Akhenaten? A hominid that is a hybrid hominid, meaning a hominid that is almost androgynous, extremely logical, uses mathematics only. You see what I mean? Like, this is the graduations of the species. And then I can't tell you enough about Britain's relationship with the canines and exactly how they understand that. I mean, I believe I even had the name of the dog of the princess, or yes, I guess she's still the queen, that she used as her medium. You see what I mean? And because I'm always in pursuit, though. I'm in hot pursuit. It's just like I was given a mission from the future to come and figure out how to keep the past. But the thing is that this is one thing about going to the future. And I'll leave people with this and then answer the final questions. If you ever say you went to the future, that means it was there. This confirms something very serious that we only need to really understand, and that means that we survived. If you went to the real future and it was actually there, it would be very simple then for you to take things from that future and then bring it back here. The reason is because this particular reality that we're in doesn't exist in the future. It's because of the way it's being run. It's using the black snake, which is oil, and there's a lot of non-efficiency going on, but mainly none taking care of the children, which is the most important thing, because that's our chain. And if our chain breaks, then we kind of spiral into the abyss again, and that would be like starting all over again. So the reality here is this. The future that I go to is really there. It's a real thing for me. I take things from the future, and I bring them back to the past. I figure out the simple crossover, which is done through a GUI, meaning the actual GUI. I place something over the top of it which is the blueprint that I'm aware of that exists within this immediate galaxy, which is encompassed in our body also, I place the blueprint over it and I mesh it over it. And then this allows me to see how the future interprets into the past. So what realm dynamics, what Astral Quest Resistance is developing, and all the individuals that are with us, is the frequency, collective frequency. It's the real application in the event of spirituality for what it really is, but not just that. And I'll explain that. Spirituality is the study of spirits. You know, that's every word that has ality on the back is the study of that. So if you don't know about spirits, because first of all, spirits are a specific group of ethereal beings, and their whole involvement with this planet and the spear ritual, which is basically a ritual carried out by spirits on human beings, then you didn't really understand spirituality. But guess what? Spirituality is not the only subject that you can become great in and a master in. Actually, it's anything that you sit down and really pursue inward. And that's when you find alchemy, because the big secret to alchemy was, and that's why the exoteric, they're all so funny. The big secret to alchemy is this, that alchemy, in learning it, allowed you to gain the proper process within your mind to understand how regeneration, well, actually birth, sustaining, and how to birth, sustain, and regenerate anything. Birth, sustain, regenerate, and even destroy. Okay, that was even another part of the alchemy, right?
Yeah.
And so these were the these were the deep teachings, right? Because some things you just have to put back in the fodder again and then try it all over again, recycle. See, recycling is destruction, by the way. So that's why when a person comes back the next life, they generally don't remember anything from the previous life because you were destroyed. Destroying is recycling. If there's no truth left and it can't handle the magnetic wave of the center of the earth, the center of the earth wipes the person's illusions like a credit card, and then they come back with the pre-program loaded for the template and give it another shot based on their latitude and longitude of the place in which they're born from, and that's their projection point. And that's why I wanted to tell people another thing, that it is important to a certain degree for you to understand where you were conceived. If you can get that data, it helps to line up things. It's just kind of a sidebar. So this is the thing that we need to realize, is that there are many lost here. And as I explained earlier, there was a technique that the real masters, or people who could help another person on the path, would use. And that's just the assessment of if they had enough of their own energy, power, knowledge, method, tool, whatever, to actually really be able to assist the individual and then be truthful about it. Because it didn't benefit the individual if you really could not help them but said you could. It actually messed you up and them because you lied and all sorts of stuff. So remember that this teaching thing is not something that we all just jump into and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm a teacher, oh, listen to me. Because I see a lot of the egotistical approach. I mean, I see it more and more where I raise completely out of what's called ego. And you
Very
see
true.
what the definition of it really is. And it's just that the constant challenge. And this is what I tell people. I don't want to get in a competition with you. I don't want to do any of that. Like, look, man, there's billions of people in the world. Like, just go play with them, but not me. Like, I'm not trying to.
I see it going on with a lot of radio hosts too, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, once it starts going, then it actually even divides networks. Like, I've watched 3 networks become divided because 2 individuals got into the big-time pissing contest. And it's strange because in a certain sense, it just shows everything about what they perceive as being real spirituality to a certain extent, because that is honestly the greatest sacrifice. Because actually now the way that they're carrying on is actually contrary to what they really are, because all these people, well, I won't say all of them, most of them start off with really good intentions. And I was reading about this in a book just recently, and it said, don't get me wrong, most of the people start off with good intentions, especially even if they're talking about wanting to heal someone. But the sheer neophyte approach at the entire thing of not really understanding the spiritual dynamic will have them going and healing someone who is actually kicking up more karma than ever. And then just thinking that that's just a good thing to do. And so what happens is it's better to not move if you don't know how to move. So do you see how what I was explaining before about some of these that have reached higher states of consciousness and continuously cycling their energy are motionless when it comes to how 3-dimensional realities work. Like, these people are sitting in caves somewhere. They don't want to interact with the world of physical matter. And, and that, but to get to that stage, because we can also see how that occurs, and, and obviously you need somebody doing that because they're still, paving the way, and who knows what's going on. But the reality is that you can see how that happens, because once you get to a certain stage where you really, in your cultivation, which could take a lifetime, you realize the importance of how much you can do on the astral plane, not only for yourself, but for others. And it's not necessarily you flying around like the Tooth Fairy, finding the astral version of the person and doing something with them. That's the physical way of looking at it. It is a frequency. And so what these quote unquote masters, the real ones that I'm talking about, are the actual ones are really doing is they're holding frequencies. They're holding worlds, higher states of consciousness, just so that they're accessible. It's like, well, there's 528 hertz. Well, why is it there still? And it's because there are beings that are in 528 hertz, and that's what they do. They're bridges. They're bodhisattvas. They're plane walkers, bridge walkers. So, and that's their frequency.
When someone comes to me and says, this person's better than you at hosting, or you're better than that person at hosting, I'm like, what? They can just go be them, and I'll be me. I'm not trying to be a cookie cutter version of a host. And there's enough airtime for everyone. There doesn't have to be a competition.
I hate to be even rude, but seeing that it's 2014, I may give them 2 words. You're lost.
Yeah,
no, but
exactly.
serious. I mean, it's crazy because you can hear it comes out of the mouth, and you don't have to be a big time etymologic, linguistic, code breaking, cipher riddling, sphinx riding time lord in order to realize when a person's coming out of their mouth sideways at you, and they're ready to kick, they're ready to churn up that negative energy. And then the easiest way to recognize it is to look upon oneself 15 years ago, maybe when you were in the height of thinking you knew what it was, especially in the teens, and then look at the whole state of mind where everything that you saw, it's like, it's not even, it can have nothing to do with spirituality. You see Madonna on TV, oh, I don't like her. You see the commercial about the car's ugly, the car's black. You see something about they're always doing that. And it's like everything is anti. And this thing, that same attitude just bleeds over into spirituality. Every person they see, something's not right about them. Look, something's not right about the entire thing. And I don't think we'll be seeing, first of all, you may be seeing right, seeing that is a specific direction. And you're not even understanding that, there's also left, meaning what you did not see, what got left, for you to be able to obtain balance. And there's a whole play in the whole words. And so basically the game never begins. And that's why, and again, we're talking about games, players, and this kind of thing as an orchestra. That first card then, the person never gets off the first card. And that's why the tarot, the wheel, rotate, sator, means a wheel, okay? The wheel never starts turning. The person stays on the first card. They have the pack on their back. They're headed down phi, meaning into constant division. The black dog is barking at their heels. That's Venus. The black dog came the Khan, right? The pack on their back contains everything. If they would just unpack it. The next step is walking off a cliff. So this is the card. So we can write volumes about it. And then we can even go into the next card about when you graduate, what comes next. But if this same system is then used exoterically to get a few dollars from people by telling them what's going to happen next in the future, mainly nothing bad, because you won't get paid, then you've debased it. You've lowered it all the way to the level of Caesar, meaning just the whole physical part of the retribution of the reality of the energy that's created, meaning you lower your energy, you sell your soul, sick cell. These words are all synonymous. I explained on another show. You sell your soul in a certain tinge to division. And that's selling soul to the devil means selling six to division. And then
there's
selling
a battle
six
for souls. And, there's definitely a battle for your soul. So you have to protect that.
For sure. I mean, something's always trying to sell you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up, Sevan.
Yeah, I mean, and then in conclusion, also just letting people know that, you can, as we talk about just landing the ship, you go back within yourself and you start making that commitment to yourself to get ready to climb your ladder, to get back into the crown of your consciousness, And, you know, like I said, most people are in the coccyx of their spine, which is where our tail is. And then there's a lot of strata on top of us, which is the fear. You climb back up the spine, get back into the seat, and this would be like the Men in Black with the alien in the head. And then you start running this thing. And then you tell the lower world, or the gonads, the goons, these are the ones that are in the lower worlds, that they need to get ready to build the Jed. You put them back, you put them in control. Because remember, you don't want to go into war with any of these parts of the body. That the universe has figured out a use for everything. Okay, that's what the universe has done, whether we like it or not. So in order for us to become universes, well, actually for us to come in a realization of our full universehood, we have to send commands into the body. And because all your urges, like we talked about before, I need to eat this and I want to eat this, come from worms that are building up in the body that all have a specific frequency. And when they're hungry, they send off because it's a primordial instinct. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Baby, the first thing they know how to yell, I'm hungry. Worms know how to be hungry. Ants know how to be hungry. All these animals' primordial instinct is to consume other energies. So when they need certain energies, and you don't have them, they demand them. And this is where, get me a pizza, give me this. And so what happens is that when you're on the crown of yourself, you actually you send the command back down, no. Actually, that's not what we're going to be eating. We're going to be eating this. We're going to clean this whole thing up. And I suggest people start addressing themselves that way, because in certain instances, you have no idea what you may have become. So it's better to just get right in there on the throne as the enforcer, mandamus, meaning that now you have to issue a decree that is not written in any book, meaning that mandamus means to issue a decree of enforcement on something that is not listed. And that's what humanity is actually dealing with. The atrocities against humanity are being worked out through loopholes because there is no quote-unquote galactic laws impeding the species that is doing this from doing this. So mandamus comes in, meaning an enforcer. Mars, arms. Notice when you go into a fight, what do you use? Arms, okay? M-A-R-M-S, M-A-R-S. So you basically get on guard. And that's when you start to basically whip everything back up into shape, literally.
and words which are spells by themselves.
Exactly. It gets really deep with the words and the worlds and the spells and the spells.
We'll be here another hour.
Exactly.
Sevan, is there any
Right.
events or anything you have coming up that you'd like to mention?
Well, I'm not sure if this one will actually make it out before tomorrow, but there's just a show coming up. There's some things that we're working on, but I'd rather get those things further to the point of completion before we start mentioning them. But obviously, we talked about secret energy today. People could keep an eye on that to see different things being put up there. But I'm just working with the template now and just getting it to do what I want it to do, and seeing its capability of being able to get information to people in a way that they can just get it immediately.
Excellent.
For sure.
Well, that was certainly a very informative program. Thank you for your time, Sevan.
You too.
All right, everyone, to sum up tonight's broadcast, I would like to quote Albert Einstein by saying, "No problem can be solved by the same level of consciousness that created it." End quote. Our closing song is by Bass Fister, featuring Indigo Angel. More of their music can be found at SoundCloud and Cloud City. On behalf of myself and the Truth Connections team, thank you very much for being here. Until next time, be safe, be good to each other. Peace.